That's weird.
All right, everyone. Hello and welcome to the 13th episode of the Screenplay Archaeology podcast. It is our first anniversary. I am your host, Kieran Medhead.
And I am Deusdaecon of Deusdaecon Reviews, back again.
After being horribly traumatized by his choice of subject matter, the Freddy vs. Jason scripts, he's managed to recover.
Yes, I do kind of regret choosing that.
Yes, you did not expect all of them to be awful, did you?
No, and that bad.
And thankfully, I picked a better subject for this month.
Yes.
I decided to do something of an event for the anniversary, making it I Am Legend month. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of different scripts for the I Am Legend movies that were used during the various points in production, going way earlier than I think a lot of you will expect.
Yes. It's kind of appropriate as well because the film gave us the first glimpse of Batman v Superman as well.
Yes, and I did hint towards this episode in the thumbnail for the YouTube version by showing that clip, which was also written by the same guy, Akiva Goldsman.
Right. Okay, I did not know that.
Yeah, Andrew Kevin Walker wrote the first pass and then he revised it.
Oh, okay.
And that version was shit, and I think the actual movie is better, but okay. So I Am Legend is, it's a classic sort of last man on Earth scenario about a man who is the last man left alive after a plague, Robert Neville, and everyone else is turned into vampires, and every night they circle around his house baying for his blood, essentially.
Mm.
And the storyline is about, his struggles with loneliness, and he investigates, it's a bacteria in the book, investigating where the infection came from, and finding, sort of scientific reasoning behind why these vampiric side effects exist. Like, why are they afraid of sunlight? Why do stakes work? Why does garlic work? What's the deal with mirrors and crosses? And it's all rather interesting.
It's a really interesting character study into Robert Neville and the book's interpretation of vampires as well.
The only thing about the book's interpretation of vampires that I found it really hard to swallow, and going off of this first script, I think even Matheson kind of admits it, is the idea of the body glue that keeps the bullets from entering.
It is a bit preposterous.
It seemed like that was just an excuse to say, why don't you just shoot him?
Yeah, it is kind of like a really just a blatant excuse. There's no other way of putting it. It's just an excuse why you can't shoot them.
But I mean,
why stakes work.
A lot of it is really good. The other thing I didn't care for in the book is the fact that all these scientists around the world were trying to figure out how to stop the infection, but they never isolated the bacteria. It was Robert Neville, factory worker, who was the first man to do so.
Well, I guess you could argue it's because the world went to shit sooner than expected.
Yeah, I guess so. Or else they were just as crap at operating a microscope as he was.
Yeah.
But then, you get a really, I love, the final twist of the book is fantastic, where he finds out that the vampires, they're just looking for a place to go. Gotcha. No, the final twist in the book, and spoilers for anyone who hasn't read it, although it's kind of a known thing at this point, I suppose.
Yeah, pretty much.
Is that throughout the book, he observes that there are infected people out there who are still alive, but he doesn't know of any other way to deal with them aside from the way he's dealing with the ones who are also undead.
It's kind of confusing because there's undead ones and there's living vampires, but they act differently.
Yeah.
So it can be kind of confusing at first.
It can be, and then he finds out that a number of these infected but still living have found a way to sort of live with the virus. Yeah. And he's been killing them along with the other kind of vampires, and so he finds out that, he is the Legend of the Night, which sort of fits with that Land of the Dead reference.
I guess.
Only it's a lot smarter.
Yeah. But, I mean, the ending of the book, though, it's really depressing. Because, from what I remember, anyway, it's just him sitting alone in a cell waiting to be executed.
Yes, he's sitting alone in the cell waiting to be executed, and then he's already dying because he got shot.
Yeah, and it's just depressing.
But it's also kind of hopeful because without him, humanity has a chance.
I guess.
It's Homo Vampirus, which that sounds a lot like an X-Men term, but
it does.
But yeah, it's a really great novel, and it's a really great ending because if without that ending, the book probably wouldn't be as well remembered as it is.
Oh yeah, well, when I say it's depressing, I also mean it fits the actual story. It's not a bad ending by any means. It's just
Yes.
it's not a good feeling ending.
Yes, but it also kind of brings his character full circle because he's no longer depressed. He
Yeah,
actually accepts it willingly, so it's kind of like it's a good ending for Robert Neville in a sense. It's really quite interesting the way how it has all these multiple facets to it.
yeah. Well, that kind of leads back into the whole character study of this guy.
Yes, and there is a lot of boozing.
Yeah,
And he break. There's a scene where he just breaks a lot of glasses. There's one flaw of the book is he can be a little frustrating
mm.
because like these tiniest little obstacles he runs into, he responds to by drinking a shitload of bourbon or whatever
Yeah,
he's drinking and then breaking the glasses.
yeah,
Like, ooh, I broke the slide on my microscope. Shit.
yeah.
But
It's a bit ham-handed when it comes to that kind of stuff.
and what's amazing about that book though is it's only Richard Matheson's third novel.
Mm.
So it's like, wow, he had a complete grasp of where he was going with his writing even that early.
Yeah, and I found that as on a whole, movies from his work actually work out pretty well.
Well, a lot of them were adapted by him.
Yeah, like Stir of Echoes is pretty good.
That wasn't him, but yeah, I actually like that one better than the book.
Yeah, and What Dreams May Come as well.
I haven't read or seen that, so.
The movie's pretty good. I mean, it's kind of weird now because it's a movie that deals with suicide and it's got Robin Williams in.
Ooh, yeah, now that I think about it.
Yeah, so it's a bit weird.
He did, I haven't seen The Incredible Shrinking Man, but the novel is incredible. So.
Ironic.
Oh, god damn it. But the novel is a great novel and it goes to a lot more, I guess, adult places than I would have expected a 50s novel to go.
Mm.
With
Yeah, it definitely seems like his work is ahead of its time.
And he was one of the most influential writers of his time when you really think about it, because Stephen King cites him as his biggest influence.
Yeah, definitely.
In terms of just, and that's one of the things that they both do. Is Matheson also started bringing horror into the suburban setting it in the normal world.
Yeah.
And it's not Lovecraft where every character is this simpering academic who can't handle the sight of his own shadow almost.
Yeah.
It's very much about normal everyday people, which is what makes it so interesting. And of the ones I've read, I really like Incredible Shrinking Man. His short stories are almost all really interesting to read. He wrote a number of really great Twilight Zone episodes.
Oh, he did? I did not know that.
Yeah, he wrote Nightmare at 20,000 Feet.
Oh, wow.
He wrote just a few of them. He wrote The Invaders, which is one of the little robot aliens attacking the woman.
Oh, yeah.
Which has that amazing twist ending. And he wrote Nick of Time, which had William Shatner in the diner.
Wow. So he basically wrote the more iconic ones.
He wrote a lot. Him and Charles Beaumont were the two big writers on that series.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and I like Hell House, the book. The movie is okay, but it does suffer a bit from the ending. Kind of lacks its punch because they didn't have the special effect to show the ghost at the end.
Yeah.
So the ending is basically Roddy McDowell screaming at an empty room. But you get an interesting sort of Michael Goff cameo as the body at the end of the movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good movie. The book's better.
Right.
But as usual,
I haven't read or seen it, so.
Oh, it's a really good little book. It's pretty messed up. And I haven't read or seen Somewhere in Time, which, it's another movie with Christopher Reeve in it that's not Superman, so that might be interesting.
But again, I'm not familiar with that one either.
It's the time travel story where he wills himself to go back in time because he's become obsessively in love with past celebrity.
Right.
It sounds interesting.
Sounds stalkerish, I guess.
Yeah, a little stalkerish.
That sounds like it could go to really dark places.
I've heard it's really good. I just haven't read or seen it yet.
Yeah.
And I like like I said, I like the Stir of Echoes movie better than the book because the book didn't age terribly well. It's like Leave It to Beaver. It's like Leave It to Beaver with a ghost in it.
Yeah, it really is. And Kevin Bacon is awesome.
Oh yeah, Kevin Bacon's always awesome. We're just like Kevin Bacon.
Yeah. And it's what's her name? It's Jennifer Morrison, I think.
Yeah, from House. Yeah, she's the ghost.
Yeah, which is really weird.
And I didn't recognize her when I saw it.
But I mean, the one thing about the movie that it does get wrong though is that um the fact that the girl dies because she gets attacked by these people, but it's never actually stated in the movie that she's supposed to have like the mental age of a 12-year-old.
Oh.
Yeah, and so that's in the book, but it's not in the film, but it's quite important.
Was that in the book?
Yeah, that's actually the kind of the point in the book.
I just remember the woman who died. She was like this. She was sleeping with every man in the neighborhood, and then the guy's wife killed her or something. Yeah, it was in the book. It was the neighbor's wife killed this woman because she slept with her husband.
Really?
Yeah. That was the twist.
Sure?
Yeah, that was the twist because in the book they think it was the neighbor that killed her, but then it turns out it was the wife that did it, and he was covering for her for some reason. I don't know. It wasn't a very good book.
Yeah, I mean, well, but the point is that was supposed to be the case, and it's not stated in the movie, so it makes it kind of confusing.
And I didn't see Stir of Echoes 2.
No, because it's shite.
Oh, it's that bad.
It's Rob Lowe, I believe.
Yeah, Rob Lowe, and I don't know, the plot synopsis just reminded me of Silent Hill Homecoming.
Yeah, it really does. And
is it worse? Is it Homecoming?
It's very hard to say. But the worst part is that I'm gonna have to look at that series.
Oh boy, that's like a lot of series. Heck, this is almost I Am Legend's kind of like a series you're gonna have to look at.
Let's not. You know.
Hey, I could say, hey, you gotta watch all those Punisher movies.
Again, let's just try not to focus on that before I go crazy.
And hey, we got Sadako versus Kayako coming out, so that's 2 series you gotta do.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I just love torturing you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I Am Legend, there was actually 3 adaptations, one sort of. You had, in 1964, you had The Last Man on Earth starring Vincent Price, which that's an exploitation movie title if I've ever seen one.
Yeah, it really is.
And it's an interesting little movie. It's got some nice moody cinematography here and there. And Vincent Price, even though Matheson has gone on record saying that he thought Vincent Price was miscast, I thought he actually did pretty well in it.
Yeah, from what I've seen clips, and he's not too bad.
Yeah, he's not bad, but it's got a lot of really good stuff in it. But it suffers from a few major flaws, one of which is that you can tell it was not filmed in America.
Yeah.
Like, you can tell it was filmed in, like, Italy somewhere. Just by the architecture. And when it gets to the whole thing at the ending with Ruth and the idea of the new half-vampire society, it plows through that in about 5-10 minutes. And then instead of him getting captured, he goes off on this foot chase where he gets chased by them through the city and he runs. He breaks into a police armory. And instead of getting all the guns that are right there, he grabs a couple of gas grenades. And so, like, the rest of the chase is him limply tossing some gas grenades behind him. And then he ends up in a church, goes fucking insane when he gets cornered on the altar and starts going like, "You're all freaks."
Yeah.
And then he gets speared by one of them and then dies.
That's not really very the dignified end from the book.
No, it's not. And it's closer than any of the other endings get.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, from what I've seen and heard, the Vincent Price one is probably the closest to the book.
Oh, it is closest because it was half based on Matheson's screenplay.
Yeah, exactly.
He just took his name off it because he wasn't impressed with the movie.
Well, yeah, that's fair enough.
So yeah, that was an interesting little movie. And then in 1971 we got The Omega Man, which
is all about the fear of the nuclear hazard.
Starring, even though it's not a nuclear event that happens, but
isn't it? I thought
no, it was like a germ bomb.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a nuclear bomb.
No, they show a huge mushroom cloud for no reason, but it's starring Charlton Heston, who's honestly really good in the movie, and Matheson thought he was a good choice. And it's an interesting movie. It's an entertaining movie, but not necessarily for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Because the bad guys are so ridiculous.
Yes.
They're like a pseudo Luddite cult, and they all talk in like hippie speak.
Well, I always remember the Simpsons parody of it.
Oh, Omega Man.
Yeah.
No, that's different, but like, so you have like some fairly fun stuff with Heston driving around the empty city with some 70s music playing and just kind of like spouting off one-liners to himself.
Yeah.
And he goes and watches a movie at the movie theater that he sets up, and he only has one movie, and it's Woodstock. And he can like say all the dialogue from Woodstock, and he ends it by saying they don't make it like they used to be.
Which I guess is kind of similar to how the movie goes as well.
Yeah, the I Am Legend movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does that, except it was dumber there. But we'll get to that.
Yeah.
And there are some good kind of action beats in it. But the bad guys are so ridiculous. They're honestly kind of entertaining because they're like the pseudo-Luddite cult, and they hate him because he represents the old world. Yeah. And they talk in pseudo-hippie speak, and they all wear like black hoods, sunglasses, and they're all chalk white. And you have
really ridiculous.
And like the right-hand man of the main bad guy is Brother Zachary, I think his name is, and he's a chalk white black guy with a chalk white afro because they're all albinos.
Oh my god.
With a chalk white afro, and he refers to Robert Neville's apartment as a hunky paradise.
Oh my god.
Because Neville has like all this art and stuff in there, like all this cultural stuff that he's held onto. And the only thing they keep with the only vampire thing they keep is that they're photosensitive.
Yeah, it's kind of just like we're kind of crazy cannibals in a way.
Yeah, except they don't eat anybody.
Yeah, I think it's just implied though, isn't it?
I don't remember, but it's been a while.
Right.
And then it gets kind of fun for about the first 45 minutes or so.
Yeah.
And then they introduce other surviving humans. Only 2 of whom are adults, the rest are children. And the children are kept off screen mostly, thankfully, but they do let them talk every now and then. It's like, oh god.
Oh dear.
And the love interest is a terrible actress. And I don't really care about their romance because of that. And the only reason anybody remembers that love story is because interracial romance was a hot button thing in 1971.
Oh, yes, of course.
I mean, she's just awful, and there's this 11th hour twist where her infection like speeds up to an insane amount, and she somehow gets under the control of the cult and then turns him over. But he manages to make a cure from his blood before he dies. And so humanity is saved. It's not a great movie, but it's entertainingly 70s, and what makes his death scene hilarious at the end is the fact that it should be kind of a darker moment, but they're playing really chipper music. Like really chipper 70s music.
Yeah.
And like the first time you see the mutants attack him, it's like this bow, 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 bow.
It's like an exploitation film.
Yeah, Charlton Heston has said that it's the most disappointing movie he's made from his, well, he said because he's dead, but from his perspective. Which, I mean, I don't know, man. You did cameo in the Planet of the Apes remake.
That's true.
Spoofing yourself. God, that movie is ass. There is a Planet of the Apes episode somewhere on my schedule. Because there was a million versions of that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But yeah, so the movie's all right, but Warner Brothers had the rights to it. And they because of the movie, they somehow kept onto the rights for like 20 years, and then sci-fi and horror kind of made a comeback in the 90s. Like Alien 3 was like a huge hit, even though it didn't make any money for Fox because they spent too much on it. And it's kind of an awful movie, but so sci-fi and horror were back, and so there was a million attempts to try and make another I Am Legend movie in the 90s, which those all fell apart, and we'll talk about that. And eventually Will Smith signed on, and we got that movie.
Yeah.
Which the general reaction to it seems to be, it's okay. I actually think it's really strong. Like the first 2/3 I think are great.
I think when it's just him, it's quite the amazing piece of acting.
Oh yeah.
Writing, because you're watching this guy in total isolation, and it's played so realistic. And it gets the sort of the degradation of society perfectly as well. You know, and it shows how, you know, nature is taking over, and it's like Times Square and all this. It's really well done in that respect.
Yes, and the whole New York thing, it's a completely different setting from any of the other versions.
Yeah.
But it's a brilliant choice because pop culture and movies have just kind of spread the image of New York across the world in a way, so you can show this movie to anybody anywhere and they can get a reaction from that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And it's just watching Times Square grown over, and you know the Washington Square and all the other, and like the Brooklyn Bridge and stuff. It's like, oh wow, that's where the Cloverfield monster.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, actually that was after this movie, weirdly enough.
Mm.
It's hard to believe how long ago this was, but this was, but it's really good. I think Will Smith is great. Like,
Oh yeah.
like he doesn't bring too many Will Smithy moments to it.
No, that's one thing I found interesting is that this is probably the least Will Smith movie out there.
And
in a way.
he said he actually struggled with that because he's so used to kind of slipping into his cocky kind of persona that he struggled, keeping up the Robert Neville thing, and he did really well with it.
Yeah, he really did.
And there's two moments where he turns into Will Smith. The bit where he sings I Shot the Sheriff.
Yeah.
Which that works okay. I actually like the whole Bob Marley thing in the movie. I think that was an interesting choice.
Yeah, I think it works. It's not like iRobot on the fucking shoes.
No. But no, it was you could tell Will Smith got this idea to say, hey, we could put this music in the movie, and it actually fit in the way.
Yeah.
And the idea of playing every little thing is going to be all right.
Yeah.
When everything clearly isn't all right.
Yeah, it was a good touch.
Is really cool. And the other bit that's very Will Smith is the Shrek scene.
Oh, the Shrek scene.
Which is just, it's just pointless.
Well, what I found was really weird about it is that it goes on a bit too long.
Yeah.
And it makes you feel really awkward.
Yeah, well, what happens is that the first time is that he wakes up and Shrek is on the TV.
Yeah.
And it's a scene towards the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And then when he comes back later and does that bit, it's a part near the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, clearly they just restarted the movie.
Yeah, like, okay, why?
I know, it doesn't really make sense.
And yeah, I don't get why they picked Shrek. But
yeah,
I mean, I love Shrek, but I mean, I don't get it. I love Shrek 1 and 2. That's a series that went, but yeah, so those two moments, and where the movie in terms of just plot falls apart for me is the third act is just kind of weak.
It is definitely the weakest part of the film. Because
I don't mind him meeting up with the woman and the kid, even though the kid is pointless and has 0 lines in the theatrical cut.
Oh yeah, he doesn't speak at all, does he?
Yeah, he's just there, and you could almost cut him out of the movie.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't make a difference. He only gets a line in the alternate theatrical version, which is a stupid name for an extended cut.
Yeah.
But the whole thing about how she can talk to God because the world is quieter now. Now, the whole thing with that is that the idea of the existence of God could make for really good science fiction. But it comes out of nowhere in the movie.
Well, it comes out of nowhere and then it just disappears.
Because it doesn't complete because he says he's listening now because of the whole butterfly thing.
Well, it's so forced and not necessary.
Which it works better with the alternate ending.
Yeah.
But it's just so weird. I'm thinking it can work as good science fiction, just not in this context.
Yeah.
And it didn't work in Star Trek either. But that's because Star Trek V is awful.
Oh yeah.
In a very special way. Damn you, Shatner. but yeah, that doesn't work. And I don't hate the theatrical ending. Like, it's not the book at all, but I can deal with it as like its own thing. I love the alternate ending.
The alternate ending was definitely an improvement, and it's a lot closer to the book, but it's still miles away from the book.
It's not the book's ending at all, but it's a similar message.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm accepting of it.
And I do like how in the alternate cut it was like they only imply some kind of society with the vampires. Mm-hmm. Which technically they're more like zombies than vampires.
Yeah,
anyway.
Because they cut there was only a few little references to it.
Yeah, like when he breaks the vial of blood to attract them.
Yeah, and they shrivel up in the sun.
Yeah, but they're basically zombies.
They're zompires. Vampombies.
Why not? The people who write these scripts make up word for vampires.
Oh boy! Wait till we get to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the CGI isn't great in the movie, but that's because they made that decision really late in the process, and it was a movie they had to rush out anyways because Will Smith's production schedule changed because originally he was going to do Hancock and then I Am Legend.
Yeah.
But then there was problems with Hancock, so they flipped the schedule. So yeah, it was just sort of an issue. And apparently they went with the CGI because the director said they had makeup and actors and it looked like a bunch of mimes running around New York, which that would be kind of funny, but not good.
Yeah, but for what it is, the CGI is not terrible.
No, I don't think it's as awful as it's made out to be. Like
And
it's just not great.
no, but it kind of works because they do look inhuman anyway.
And
So
they don't show them for like what, half an hour?
no, well, I think they don't show them until like halfway through. I think
Yeah, because you get like because the scene where he goes into that building when you
they're
first
like it's briefly glimpsed.
yeah, and then you see the guy stick his head out briefly there,
Yeah,
but you don't really get long looks at them until pretty far in.
yeah. It's only until like the climax where he's like going crazy in the car.
But yeah, yeah there. And speaking of going crazy in the car, what they do with the dog in the movie is I thought that was a brilliant choice because
Yeah,
when Smith has to kill the dog, that's just such a sad moment. Like it's played so perfectly.
yeah, and of course it's perfectly acted as well.
Yeah, perfectly acted. And
Mm.
I actually think that was the right choice considering in the base version of that movie that we read the script for, the dog doesn't die.
Yeah.
And Mark Protosevich has gone on record saying that people give him a lot of flack for killing the dog, and he was like, "I didn't kill the dog. Akiva killed the dog." And I'm like,
But,
Akiva was right. I know the man wrote Batman and Robin, but he was right in this case.
yeah. I mean, it's part of the original book as well, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It's different because he finds a dog, and when he finds it, it's already been infected,
Ah, okay.
and then he has to kill it.
Yeah, yeah.
And he
So I
sort of,
get, yeah,
and that's sort of the final part of his hardening, where his sort of depressed self sort of ends, and he just accepts the situation.
yeah.
And it is really sad in the book, but I think making it like his dog that he spends a lot of time with, and it was his,
Especially it was his daughter's dog as
yeah, it
well.
was his daughter's dog. I think that really added to it.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
I did. Speaking of the family, I did think it was a good choice that we don't actually see them die.
I would have preferred them dying of the plague, though.
Yeah, it would have made it a bit more impactful.
Yeah, it would have made why he would just be so focused on the infected like he was make more sense. But
Yeah, because the biggest complaints I have about the way they were killed off in the film, if people aren't familiar, it's basically just a helicopter crash, isn't it?
yeah, it's like people are like hanging off of one helicopter trying to get on it, spins out of control and smacks into theirs.
Yeah, it's pretty just out of the blue. So in the film, it's kind of like he stays because he's like, I got shit else to do. Might as well stay.
Yeah.
But if it was the plague, like you said, it would have given his drive much more motive.
His drive to cure it, because in all the movies they make him a scientist for whatever reason.
Yeah,
Which I feel like that's a choice which makes sense because it explains how he's able to do all the experiments that he does.
yeah. It's a way of giving information to the audience
And
as well.
although I do miss the whole everyman
Mm.
feel to the character, but I think Will Smith brings a measure of that to the character.
Yeah, it's a very realistic character.
Yes.
He's not Superman.
No, he's not. Although he did almost play Captain America,
That would have been an interesting choice.
and he was considered for Superman for I think it was the Abrams Superman,
Right.
which that would have been weird.
Yeah.
Hey Martha, and Jonathan, why did you have a black baby?
We don't talk about it.
Martha went to New Orleans for a summer and came back with him.
Wow.
Okay, that was bad, but that's a little too realistic.
Yes. Let's move on.
My wife was not supposed to have a child.
Yeah. Yes.
See, that explains the ring. Samara is Kryptonian. But no. Okay, back on topic. The movie is really, really good. And it's better if you watch the extended version.
Yeah, the extended alternate cut is far superior because it explains a lot more, and because in the extended cut, I think as well, he actually goes back to when he gets in that snare.
He goes back there and he says,
He actually goes back and he's like, they can't do this. How did this happen?
And it's like he was like, I didn't do this.
Yeah, so it's really interesting stuff.
And then and then at the end when you find out that they were chasing him because he took the guy's woman.
Yeah.
And that they have a certain sense of humanity to them now.
Mm.
And he he realizes he's been experimenting on them and killing them. People who have, some ounce of humanity left in them, and he just looks over at all the pictures on the wall and just slumps down. That's a great scene.
Yeah, with all the dead test subjects.
Yeah.
It's perfectly shot because you've got in the foreground you've got Will Smith, behind him out of focus you got these pictures, and then you've got the vampires, and it's like there's something about that shot that just it's perfectly done. That entire section is so well done because there's no dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
It's all done through facial expressions, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he just kind of says, "I'm sorry."
Yeah.
And you buy that he believes it. He believes that. And then I do think the little tag on the end of them leaving New York is a little too bright and cheery.
Yeah, but I mean, it's less cheery than them finding the last human civilization.
Although I do miss the use of Redemption Song over the ending credits.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but they credit the screenplay to Omega Man in the closing credits, even though the movies are nothing alike.
Really? That's a weird choice.
Yeah, I don't get why they did that, but
yeah.
Honestly, I think the one script we're going to talk about is more in common with Omega Man, but yeah, it's actually a really solid movie. I do like that little tag at the end though because it explains the plot hole of how they could drive into New York when there's no more bridges.
Yeah,
because they left one bridge in place. That makes more sense.
It does make more sense.
And I do wish Neville had done the narration at the end instead of the woman too.
Yeah, because she just shows up in like the last 20 minutes or something.
Yeah, and
we've been with this guy the whole time.
And I like that actress, but she always is like put in the worst parts of movies.
Yeah.
Like she was the pseudo love interest in Elysium.
I have not seen that.
Nah, it's got Charlotte Copley is amazing in it, but the movie's just kind of blah.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, and then before this next movie, it actually released before the Will Smith I Am Legend. And it was the Asylum mockbuster I Am Omega. And I did a review of this, which is going to be uploaded before this is uploaded, but my god, this movie was a piece of shit. I was expecting bad, but I wasn't expecting boring bad.
Right.
Because the movie is literally just scene after scene of Mark Dacascos sitting around, fucking driving to places and not really doing anything, and occasionally he kills a zombie. Like, there's literally a scene where he drives out to this other cabin, and there's like a fridge with beer in it, and gets out the beer, talks to a corpse, and then drives away after killing a zombie.
Oh, okay.
And then there's a bit after that where he sees a rabbit sitting in the road, and he stops and gets out and looks at the rabbit. And it's weird, because like, every time a zombie shows up, it's like he can sense it before it's there. And there's a bit where he goes and runs up a little hillside road, and it holds at his car while he runs up the entire path. Ugh.
That sounds like a movie full of padding.
Yes, it is full of padding. The only good thing about the movie is that I like Mark Dacascos as an action guy, and he gets a couple of pretty badass fight scenes. Like there's a bit where he gets like two, and they're not that long, but there's one part where he kicks the shit out of a zombie and then like hacks it up with a machete, which is pretty cool.
Right.
And then there's a bit where he just takes some nunchucks like 5 zombies at once. But like the plot, just when it finally has a plot, it's awful. You have these annoying redneck guys, and you have this woman who's maybe a cure, and then the whole thing with the redneck guys doesn't make any sense when you find out what they're really doing. It's a shitty movie. Don't watch it.
Well, it's Asylum, so
it's so shitty they didn't even credit Richard Matheson.
That's just insulting. But I mean, maybe it's better for him. Really,
it's a good thing his name isn't on that movie. And his opinions on the various movies is that he felt like there was merit in Last Man on Earth, but he thought Vincent Price was miscast.
Yeah.
And he said Omega Man, it was so different from the source material, even though he didn't like it, he didn't really care.
Right, so he didn't even consider it an adaptation.
And he said that I Am Legend, the Will Smith movie, he said it's not his novel, but he thought it was very good.
Oh, okay. That makes me feel better about liking it now.
And he said that he thought Will Smith nailed the character.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I don't know if he saw the alternate ending or not, so maybe he would change his stance slightly.
Maybe.
But yeah, and I know he didn't like any of the scripts that were done in the 90s, I don't think.
Right.
And he said his casting choices for Robert Neville would be, because this was in the 90s, he said his top choice was Harrison Ford.
I can see that.
I can see that. And he also said, because he was asked about a certain number of people who were attached to it, he said he thought Kurt Russell would be a good choice.
getting a bit too close to Escape from New York, though, isn't
Yeah, a little bit.
it?
And he also said he thought Nicolas Cage would be good.
Maybe.
It, it,
I don't really see it though.
it depends on what Cage you get. If you get Leaving Las Vegas Cage, it could work.
Yeah,
But if you get Wicker Man Cage, it's not going to work.
yeah. You kind of have to toss the coin with him.
Which they're both amazing, but in different ways.
Mm.
But the only problem I would have with Nick Cage as Robert Neville is that because I've seen Vampires Kiss.
Oh Christ, yeah.
Have you seen that?
No, but I've seen all the memes.
Oh yeah, but I couldn't watch. I would have a hard time watching it without imagining him going, "I'm a vampire. I'm a vampire."
Yeah.
God, that movie's awful, but he's hilarious in it. I'm a vampire.
I'm pretty sure he is the only reason people know that movie.
Yeah, he is. It's like American Psycho, only crap.
Yeah, exactly.
American Psycho, that's a movie where you get to see Christian Bale axe the Joker to death.
Oh yeah. Holy shit. Completely forgot about that.
Everything's connected, man. We're in a big web. So yeah, those are the movies that actually exist in terms of I Am Legend.
Mm.
Now, as for the scripts, were you surprised how far back this went as I did?
I was surprised about the fact that this has been in production for decades, because even the concept of I Am Legend is fairly recent. But I think that's because it's only become popular, and like we said before, Matheson is kind of ahead of his time.
Yes. Now, the Last Man on Earth thing had existed for quite a while before that. I mean, it goes back to various mythologies even.
Yeah, definitely. But I'm more about the whole zombie apocalypse thing, you know?
Well, in fact, before we go on, actually, we forgot to mention the unofficial adaptation, or the movie that was heavily inspired by and is probably the best known, Night of the Living Dead. So,
really?
Yeah, Night of the Living Dead. Romero has said that he was inspired to make that story by reading I Am Legend, and the reason why they're flesh eaters instead of blood drinkers is because he wanted to do something different.
Oh, so that's an actual quote. I did not know that.
Yeah, he actually has said that.
Wow, okay. I did not know that. I saw something different.
That wasn't the exact quote, but he also, I think he said basically the idea of being surrounded by the undead in a house.
Yeah.
He kind of took that concept and went his own way with it. So without I Am Legend, we literally would not have the zombie apocalypse genre.
Yeah.
In some ways, that's a mixed blessing.
Yeah, because, Romero made it, and then he destroyed it.
Because the zombies are only looking for a place to go.
That's not even the worst one. You got Diary, which is just...
Yeah, that's not the worst. I actually don't mind Land of the Dead. It just has some really bad stuff in it. And I saw about 15 minutes of Diary and turned it off. I honestly was surprised at how far back making an I Am Legend movie went, because I had known that Hammer Films wanted to make one and then they weren't able to.
Yeah.
That was Undertale Night Creatures, but I didn't know it was Richard Matheson writing it. And in 1957, which was only 3 years after the book came out.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy, because it's such a big concept as well.
Yes, it is.
You wouldn't really see at the time. And it would have, if they had made it, especially the first script, if they had made it the way this script is, I think it would have been a classic.
I maintain it might have changed Hammer.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like, they would have gone away from making, 100 cookie-cutter Dracula sequels. Which, as fun as they are and as awesome as Christopher Lee is, they do get awful after a while.
Yeah, they definitely do. But yeah, if this had come out like it is here...
in 58 or 59...
that would have been monumental at the time.
That would have completely changed everything. We would have no zombies.
Yeah, exactly. It would have all been about... we would have had the vampire craze several decades before it happened.
And it would have been better than it is now.
Yes.
Which it's getting better, but it's just unfortunately you can make traditional vampires and still make them suck, we're learning. 30 Days of Night 2, anyone?
Yes,
but this is going to be a positive episode, because I think Night Creatures, which really generic title though, is a pretty good script.
Yeah, it's certainly one of the more... I mean, of all the ones I've read for this show, it's like, this feels the most professional and the most well thought out in terms of film to source material adaptation.
Yeah, because it changes a lot of things,
Yeah.
but the changes in the main make sense. Now, it's not perfect. There are places where I think that it's structurally a little off
Mm.
because I think that the flashbacks start too early.
Yeah. Because
And
it literally does. It just starts off. You get a little bit with modern day Neville, and then it's immediately in a flashback.
and then it gets to a point where I'm not even sure if it's still in a flashback or not because
Mm.
his voiceover just keeps going.
Yeah, it's weird because the whole point is he's talking to a recorder, isn't he, to record
Yeah.
his experience. But after a while, the recorder kind of just leaves the script,
Yes.
and you're never too sure whether it's narration or he's just talking into the recorder still.
And there's stuff where it's like I feel like, him researching the infection could have been pushed earlier. The stuff with the dog, which we'll talk about, could have been pushed a little earlier and made a bigger part of the script.
Oh yeah, the dog just appears and then goes, and it doesn't really do much.
Which is what it did in the book, but it doesn't go away for really dumb reasons like it does here. And it does cop out on the ending.
It does.
But up until those last couple pages, it's really, really good for the most part. Just talking about this script on the whole, it's largely faithful to the book, so every subplot basically happens. You have Neville being drunk and miserable. You have him investigating the infection. You have him going to his wife's grave and getting caught out after dark. You have him finding the stray dog that he tries to take in, but it doesn't work out. And then you have him meeting Ruth the woman, and then leading into the whole new society thing. So everything.
And you also have his former friend.
Yes, his former friend Ben Cortman, who's now the vampire. He's not hugely intelligent, but he's smarter than the average vampire.
Yeah.
Which is a weird as hell statement to make.
Also, I mean, this is a personal problem, but I just could not stop reading this guy in Cartman's voice.
God damn it, Never.
It really is, because I just kept seeing Cartman.
Oh my god, they killed Cortman. You bastards.
Oh god.
But yeah, you have that there too. And the first thing that struck me about this script is that in the first paragraph, it mentions that this takes place in Hudson Town, Canada. Now, the original novel, I refuse to call it a novella because novella is a stupid term the publishing industry came up with.
Yeah.
And it takes place in Gardena, which is a suburb of Los Angeles, and it basically takes place in the house Richard Matheson lived in at the time. And if you look at a map and you look at some of the clues from the book, you can actually narrow it down to the block.
Huh. Wow. That's impressive.
But it's probably a much worse neighborhood now than it was then.
Yeah.
But, okay, obviously, Hammer would not have been able to...
I mean, that's what I was going to ask as well. This script, who was it? What production was it for?
It was for Hammer.
This was for Hammer, so it would have been Britain?
Yeah, they probably would have filmed it at Elstree at this point.
Yeah, they probably would have filmed it in a British studio, yeah, so...
They were still at Elstree Studios, I think, at the time, which was basically just a house they filmed at, I think.
Yeah, pretty much.
It was like an estate. But what was interesting is that he wrote it for Hammer. I assumed going into this that, they would just reset it to England and just use their stock actors and stuff.
Yeah.
That was my assumption. So the Hudson Town, Canada thing threw me out, it being the fastest growing town in northern Canada.
Yeah, it is oddly specific.
I just kind of wonder, did he want to make it semi-American, but a kind of, North American that the British could reasonably fake?
Maybe.
Because actually, most British actors I know of can actually fake the American accent pretty well.
Yeah.
With the exceptions of Pierce Brosnan and David Tennant.
Well, I don't think Tennant was that bad.
Well, he was just being British in Jessica Jones, but
yeah.
But Hudson Town, Canada just seems like such an interesting choice. And just the fact that, and there's one thing that it kind of falls apart with in the plot, is that it's the fastest growing town in northern Canada. So how does he not run into the half vampire society in any capacity? Because it never sounds anywhere big enough for them to go unnoticed.
Yeah, it is strange how it portrays itself as like this almost suburb sized.
It's like a boom town somewhere.
Yeah, but apparently these people have completely go unnoticed by this guy who's going literally door to door as well.
Now, it makes more sense in the book. Now, I understand because, most of them still sleep during the day. They go into like a coma, so he wouldn't notice them.
Yeah.
But you would think in a town that sounds relatively small, he would hear them moving around at night.
Yeah, or see their cars and guns, because...
Yeah, they have cars and guns and big-ass spears.
Yeah, so it's a little unbelievable.
Yes, it is. And yeah, that's a problem with it, but it's an interesting idea. One of the things that I kept expecting to have that didn't is because they specifically say northern Canada. I was expecting sort of a 30 Days of Night thing to sort of slip in where he has to survive, the oncoming Canadian winter. And he apparently has survived 3 years, so supplies aren't a problem, I guess.
Yeah, that's something I always found interesting, is that there's never any kind of scarcity of supplies. Even in the movie, he's just got a stockpile of everything. Which, after 3 years, would that really be realistic?
Well, canned food, I think, would
I
last.
guess.
Canned food, I think, would last. I think the frozen food would last as long as he can keep it frozen.
Yeah. But it's just lines like in the movie, there's lines like, he says, "I was saving that bacon."
Well, in the later versions of this, he has ridiculously high-tech operations. This is like he's just scraped everything together that he can.
Yeah.
Now, one thing in this that right at the beginning, so yeah, the setting's weird, and there is no Hudson Town, Canada, at least in northern Canada. I looked at maps, and the closest I could get was Hudson, a suburb of Montreal, which, unless you consider being right next to goddamn Maine, northern Canada, it's not.
Yeah, they probably made it up.
But one thing I thought was interesting, the idea is that's located near Hudson Bay.
Yeah.
Which would make sense, and it turns out Henry Hudson was a vampire all along. But yeah, it's that the first thing that the script shows, and this was really immersive and atmospheric, is that they're going through the town, just showing all how everything's falling apart, everything's empty. There's bodies, which I don't know why there's bodies, because aren't they vampires? But
yeah.
But it's a really sort of engrossing sort of thing they show, and they show and they mention that there's the big black plume of smoke that's going to be shown in varying degrees in every shot.
Right, yeah.
Which that's the pit where he dumps the bodies, which I actually like that idea.
Yeah, I did like the idea, but the fact that it's like perpetually burning, it just reminded me of the tire fire in The Simpsons. How is he keeping that burning for so long?
I don't know. I mean, I guess it's, I don't know, but it's a great idea that it's like hanging over him.
It is a good idea, though. Yeah.
It's a movie. It doesn't have to be realistic.
I know. It's the critic in me.
Yeah, it is. Man, that's where they would do the fire if The Simpsons did I Am Legend.
Yeah.
That's where they would do. I'm actually imagining this now. Homer Simpson as Robert Neville and Ned Flanders as Ben Court. I want this now.
Yeah.
Come out, Homer. Oakley dokley. And then Bart's the one who comes back from the grave to attack him.
Yeah.
And he just strangles him to death. Oh god, this is amazing. It's probably better than anything that's been on The Simpsons in the last 15 years.
You can call it I Am Homer.
I Am Homer. I Am Homega. No, don't reference that movie.
Oh god, no.
But yeah, that's just such a great image, and the opening of Last Man on Earth is basically that. Now, the opening where I think it makes a misstep is that you see him sort of preparing his house for the night, and then you see a little bit of him huddled inside his house, and then it goes into flashback mode.
Yeah.
The way I would have opened it is you get the big panoramic shots of the empty town, then you see his whole daily routine. Like, you maybe see, hints of the vampires, moving away from his house at sunrise, and then you see his daily routine, and you sort of get a feel for what he's up to. You don't see him staking the vampires, but it's implied.
Yeah.
And then that night, you hear them outside, and then you jump into the flashback.
Yeah, because I think I think I Am Legend, the movie, did that as pretty well as that.
Every time he's asleep.
Yeah, it showed a day in the life stuff before any of the vampire stuff, and it showed like the first night we see he's like sleeping in the bathtub, and all you hear is this huge roar, and I think that's and I love that because it's all implied, it's all imagination. I love that.
Like, yeah, all you would hear in my... I almost want to go make my own low-budget version of this.
Yeah.
And just be like, hey, Nicolas Cage, you want to work for some biscuits?
Yeah.
Which is sad because the man is a great actor, but I almost want to just go out, find like a neighborhood here in Houston, and just be like, let's film this.
Well, I think that's what's good about it as well, is that you could do that.
Yeah.
And it would still work.
Yeah, I almost want to do it now. Just and you get the idea of his house, and I like the addition that he has a little fence around his house that he has electrified.
Yeah.
I actually think that's a pretty cool idea because it keeps the vampires a certain distance back. Now, there are problems with it a little bit later, which tie into the dog.
Oh, yeah, that moment.
That moment. But you get a lot of really great stuff, and I love the flashback stuff in this, even if I feel like it starts too early, and they never really properly conclude it.
Yeah. Well, I do like the fact that they like, it slowly reveals Ben Cortman before he was a vampire.
Yes, I like that.
That moment's great.
And opening the flashback at the daughter's birthday party is from Last Man on Earth, so they kept that.
Yes.
And I like how you get, because in the book you get like one brief little moment with Neville and his wife sitting around the breakfast table, and they're talking about, and they give you these weird hints about what's going on in the world, like, oh, there's been nuclear bombings, and oh, someone found some giant grasshoppers in Colorado, and it's like, what? Wow, this is an interesting universe.
Yeah, and they're like all worried about this plague or whatever.
Yeah, and that they're worried about the plague, and you can tell she's sick, and maybe the daughter's sick. It's not revealed yet. And then he goes outside, he gets in the car, and Ben Cortman drives him to work. Here, you actually get a built-up relationship between the two, and you get an idea of what Ben Cortman was like before the infection.
Yeah.
Now, where it differs from Last Man on Earth is that they're scientists in that version. Now, I don't know why they put chemical researchers in charge of a biological problem. Which that's why they could never find a solution, because they're the wrong type of scientists.
Yeah.
And I just like the idea that Ben Cortman is just this incredibly nice guy, like almost selfless in a way, but he's the one who gets. And the fact that the daughter calls him Uncle Ben, I'm just like, keep him away from Sandman.
Yeah, but it was a great juxtaposition.
And I like how it kind of contrasts the two of them. How Ben Cortman is, he's almost already willing to believe that there are vampires, and he descends into like a superstitious funk, whereas Robert Neville is trying to keep to logic and reason, and it turns out that the real answer is somewhere in between that. And whereas Cortman literally becomes the monster, that ultimately ends up happening to Neville too. He becomes a monster in his own right.
Yeah, well, that's one thing I found odd, is that it's shown that Cortman is quite paranoid near the end. Like, he doesn't open the door or anything. So how did he even get infected?
It gets because it's airborne.
But I guess. But that, it doesn't really state that, though, so I guess.
Yeah, Neville says it later that it spread on the wind via spores.
Oh, okay. I must have missed that.
Yeah,
sorry.
It's gone into more detail in the book, because they talk about how there's been all these huge dust storms since the bombings.
Oh, yeah.
And that the spores, the reason why it went worldwide is because it spread on the spores. But I love, the contrast between the two, how the one who's deathly afraid of vampires ends up becoming one, and the one who doesn't believe in them doesn't. And that their two approaches are both correct, just in different ways than they thought.
Yeah, it's nice, the fact that you have both the characters going. That it's almost like both characters go through the movie simultaneously, and you see their different approaches. You see their different personalities change. Because Ben Cortman is like, he's really nice at the start, but then he becomes paranoid and he won't even drive the guy when he needs to take his wife.
Yeah, and I really like that scene where he goes to get the car. Yeah, and Cortman's just sitting there going like, he's like, please go away, and you get the pain he's going through there.
Yeah,
which that's different from the scene in the book, because in the book he goes to Cortman's house, and Cortman and his wife are both dead on the bed, and it's implied that he's a vampire and he killed her.
Right. Okay.
And that's actually the if you see the trailer for I Am Legend Month that I put together, that's the quote I read at the beginning of that.
Oh, okay, cool.
Hopefully my voice acting wasn't too crappy for those of you who watched it. But yeah, I actually really like this idea how he's just like he's so paranoid he won't leave the house, and you
Yeah.
feel really bad for this guy.
Mm.
And whereas Cortman in the book, he's an interesting character in the idea that he's Neville's neighbor and acquaintance who's now trying to kill him. But
Yeah.
this just adds an extra layer. It's very intelligently written, I think.
Yeah, it does. It gives that because it kind of explains why he doesn't just kill the guy. Because
Yes.
he could just in the day go next door and just stake him, but he doesn't because he's his friend.
Well, in the book, he does go searching for him, but it's implied that he doesn't really want to find him because he enjoys the chase.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So there's that. And I actually think this is a more interesting direction
Mm.
to take it in. And I find Cortman to be hugely fascinating here.
Although he doesn't, when he becomes a vampire, all he says is Neville. That's it.
Come out, Neville.
Yeah, he doesn't actually say anything else,
Which
which is a bit of disappointment.
Well, that's him from the book.
Yeah, I know, but
But-
I just find it
Which-
kind of disappointing.
That was a problem with Last Man on Earth, is that everybody who wasn't Vincent Price was really badly dubbed.
Oh,
And he's renamed Robert Morgan. And so you just have this really awful dubbing on Ben Cortman going, come out, Morgan.
right.
And Vincent Price's death grunt at the end is really obviously dubbed in. It goes, ooh. And there's a little trivia game on the DVD I used to own where they ask you questions about the movie, and if you get it wrong, it plays that clip of him dying, and he goes, kind of robbed that moment of any seriousness. So yeah, the script, it's actually pretty close to the book in terms of the flashbacks. It's just expanded. Like the daughter gets sick, and they add some stuff with the family doctor who does make house calls.
Yeah.
Mr. Powers. And it's interesting how he's a medical doctor who even he has it, and yet he's still trying to help people. That's a good doctor.
Yeah, I like that, and it worked.
And I like the interaction between him and Neville.
Yeah.
And a little bit of interaction he has with Ben Cortman. But so the daughter dies, and this is a change from the book, because in the book the government just comes and takes her away. Here, Neville and Cortman drive her to the pit, and he has to hand her over.
Well, what happens is that the military want to take her, but he says, "I'll take her, leave her alone."
Yes.
And it's a lot more painful, and I hesitate to say that it's good, but you know what I mean.
I like how it's well done.
It's well done. It's well written.
It really twists the knife.
Yeah, it does.
And it's done somewhat similarly in Last Man on Earth, except instead of him driving her there, they take her, and then he goes to the pit and tries to get her out.
Right.
But he's going to the military guys. He's like, my daughter's in there, and then the soldier's like, there's a lot of daughters in there, including my own. And even though it's poorly dubbed, that line actually works.
Yeah, that kind of puts everything in perspective, really.
And that's one thing the script does really well, is showing you how everything falls apart from like a ground level perspective.
And it's really realistic as well.
Yes, you feel like this is really like this could really happen.
Yeah, because you got the guys who are taking the bodies, the military guys.
Yes.
And they just say, oh, there's no point. Just let him do what he wants.
Yes. And there is the ham-handed bit where his alcoholism begins when the flask soldier literally pours alcohol down his throat, which I think I could make that connection well enough without that moment.
Yeah. It was, that kind of stuff. The alcoholism stuff is kind of forced in this script particularly, I think.
Yes, it is. But it's forced mainly because of that moment, I feel.
Yeah.
Like when he's getting drunk, it works. Now the stuff with him singing while drunk, no.
No, I didn't like that.
Oh, I don't like that, even though people do sing when they're drunk, but
I thought that was really cheesy, and it wasn't even that good of a song.
Oh. Now I do like the bit where he becomes the vampire rights activist while drunk. That was funny. That's from the book.
Yeah.
It's like, are they not a persecuted minority?
Yeah, he's just he's
gone
different roles.
He's gone full Tumblr at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, that stuff and the flashbacks are all really good. Like part of things falling apart is when they show that guy who's trying to bury his wife in the cemetery and he gets led off by soldiers.
Yeah, the hallowed ground stuff.
Yeah, that's something that would actually happen.
Yeah.
And then Neville buries his wife in the vacant lot, and he actually disguises the grave, which I thought was an interesting touch, which I don't remember being in the book.
Well, I thought it was interesting because he's literally forced to put his wife in an unmarked grave. And that's kind of powerful in itself,
Yes, that is pretty powerful, because it's like, well, no one will ever find her again, not even him.
Yeah.
But that gets turned on its head when later that night she manages to claw her way out and comes after him.
Which is crazy.
Which is a great scene.
Yeah, it is.
And it's enhanced from the book because they added, the whole fence thing. And he hears the gate creak open. He can kind of see a shadow moving outside. And then when he opens the door and she's there, that's just, ugh.
Yeah, and I can imagine that being really effective in a movie as well.
And that scene, it's actually pretty decently effective in Last Man on Earth because they do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they do it, but they don't explain what happens to her in that movie, so it's just like, so she lunges at him, and what happened?
Oh, that sounds like they didn't want to show something there.
Like, it was a low-budget movie filmed in Italy. They could probably have gotten away with it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Hammer.
Well, that wasn't Hammer. That was that was American International, because Hammer canceled this project.
Oh, okay.
Which I'll get into when we're done talking.
Yeah.
But so we get him taking his wife to the grave he later puts her in, and he stakes her and leaves her there. And then we get more of him, sort of setting up his preparations around his house, which I really liked.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
all that preparation stuff was really interesting.
Like how it gradually goes from him seeing a vampire at the window to hanging garlic and then boarding it up when they still throw rocks.
Mm.
And then electrifying the fence to keep them away. Like it's really logically written out.
Yeah, and it's there's nothing ridiculous. Like he's not setting up 5-foot walls or something ridiculous like that. It's all stuff a regular man would think to do.
You're thinking of the next script when you said that, right?
What do you mean?
The 5-foot walls.
Oh yeah, no, sorry.
Oh.
But now I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, guys, as the script goes on, they get increasingly high tech. It gets kind of silly.
Yeah.
There's one where he's basically Batman. He has like an auxiliary base and all.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you get all that, and then at some point it switches back to present day, but he keeps narrating, so it's a little weird. Like, so you get the sequence where he gets caught out after dark.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't wind his watch like a dumbass. And he visits the wife's grave, which is a nice scene. And then he finally realizes, maybe the sun harms vampires.
Yeah.
That was a weak moment in the book as well.
Yeah.
Rich, why didn't you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, surely that would have just happened accidentally.
Yeah.
At least once.
Not 3 years later, or 18 months, or whatever they say. But yeah, it's weird, but it works. He gets absorbed in experiments, but he ends up getting caught out after dark, which Last Man on Earth does that scene relatively faithfully, except it leaves out a little bit of the driving around, and it cuts out the experimenting, but he just sort of passes out at the wife's tomb and then wakes up and it's after dark.
That's even more stupid.
Which is, it's a fine, it works fine, I think, in the movie.
Yeah, but, I guess, but I just think at this point, like the way they did it in I Am Legend is a lot better, because I think he should be so focused at this point that he wouldn't just forget something like that.
But this is a change from the book, which doesn't make sense, where it hasn't been that long during the early, because the book takes place over the course of like 3-4 years.
Yeah.
So the parts take place fairly soon after the early stuff has happened. And that's one of the early parts.
Right.
So it makes a little more sense there, but
yeah, I guess.
But you have to compress things for a movie, as always.
Yeah.
And so that scene happens. That scene's done pretty well. I like the bit where he goes nuts and just starts firing his pistols at the vampires.
Yeah.
John Woo style.
And he does actually hit some as well.
Yeah, but now I will make another John Woo reference in regards to a later script. Which you'll know it when you get to it.
Yeah.
And that part's pretty good, and I believe it's after this incident that he actually finds the dog outside the house.
Well, I think...
Because he goes out to check the generator which they screwed up a little bit, and there's a big mess in the garage, and then
Oh
he hears,
yeah, that's right.
and then,
After they trashed the place because they couldn't get in.
yeah, they break his car and stuff, and then he sees the dog moving around.
That's right.
And then the whole thing from the book where he prepares a bowl of meat and a bowl of milk
Yeah.
to get the dog, that's done, only it's shortened. And in this, unlike in the book, he actually has the dog for a while.
Yeah.
And the dog sort of gives him, the reason to move on and, work out his situation. So he starts investigating the vampiric plague and figuring out what it is and what it does and all the vampire stuff. I wish there was more of it in the book. I mean,
Yeah.
in the script. Because it's kind of, he only does it for a little bit, and then it seems like, because it doesn't seem like that much time passes.
Yeah. Well, from what I thought when reading it is that he starts his investigation, continually gets distracted by either alcohol or something else.
Him breaking slides like a dumbass.
Yeah, and it just feels like in the script specifically that he gains the ability, so to speak, to use the microscope just to check the Ruth character.
Uh-huh.
You know?
Yeah.
That's the only reason it's there, to have that reveal later on. It doesn't feel anything more than a plot device, is what I'm saying.
This part should have gone on longer, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
if it went on longer, it would have been much more character based rather than just plot based.
And it should have happened a little earlier, and the dog should stick around for longer.
Yeah.
Because, okay, we get him investigating. It's like he sees the virus, the bacteria. You can't see a virus with a regular microscope.
Yeah.
I don't know why it took him months to figure out how to use the microscope, but...
Well, they just refer to it as a germ, don't they?
Yeah, well, it's a bacteria in the book.
Yeah, but
if it's a germ, you can see under a microscope it's bacteria.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that they're quite non-specific in the script about what it is, whether it's a virus, a bacteria.
I think he just forgot to put that part in there.
Fair enough.
Yeah, because you can't see a virus under a regular microscope, so.
Right, yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah, it's too small. But yeah, it's like he gets it, and then later on, when he meets the woman, which doesn't happen that long after in the script because they kind of condense things, he knows everything. So
yeah, he just knows everything about the virus and what affects vampires, what kills them, and all this.
Yeah, so that's a little rushed through, and then we get the death of the dog. Which, should I cover this? Because this really pissed me off when I read it.
Yeah, if it pisses you off, you should deal with that anger.
Basically what it is that he makes a big deal about keeping the dog safe. He leaves it in the car whenever he goes into a building. He locks it in the kitchen when he's doing his vampire experiments. And then he goes out to check the fence, the electric fence, and check the boards and stuff, and he doesn't bother to make sure he properly closed the damn door. So the dog gets out, and somehow in this tiny little front yard, he doesn't notice the dog got out. Goes in, locks the door, he hears it crying, he can't follow the sound with his own ears, so he's just wandering around the house going, oh, he names it Friday, by the way, which is way too on the nose. And he's just going around the house going, Friday, where are you, boy? I'm like, open the door, and then Cortman's across the street going, like, trying to gesticulate to the dog.
Yeah.
Going, come, and of course the dog's growling on the front porch.
It's really weird because in the script it's like so obvious, and it makes Neville look like a complete moron for not even hearing anything.
He hears the dog, but he can't find where it is, which is dumb.
That's just stupid.
And then he finally figures out it's outside, and he goes, oh no, the fence, and then turns it off. The vampires all swarm over the fence. He runs out.
Why would he do that? That's so stupid.
Because he doesn't want the dog to electrocute itself, and most dogs are smart enough to stay away from that.
Yeah.
And by the way, my dog, she would not be even for a second tempted by a vampire. She barks at every strange person she sees.
Right.
So he goes out, tries to get the dog, but the vampires are swarming around and he can't get to it. So he goes back inside, looks through the peephole, and it's implied that Ben Cortman snaps its neck.
Yeah, he just holds it up and then does something.
Yeah, he holds it up by the neck, so I'm guessing he just tore it or something.
Yeah, pretty much.
Twisted the neck, and so it cuts to him with the dog wrapped in the blanket, and he's going to go bury it, which, when he looks out and you get the idea of the horrified look on his face, that's a great moment.
Yeah.
But everything leading up to it was stupid.
Yeah, it could have been done a lot better. And in I Am Legend, it was done a lot better.
Oh, in the movie it's done a lot better. In the later scripts, it's done better.
Yeah, exactly. So,
The ones that have the dog, at least.
It's definitely one of the weakest parts of the script.
Like, it was a good idea, and Matheson was once again ahead of his time because he came up with the idea of expanding the dog as a character before Mark Protosevich did.
Yeah.
Which, I don't see him ripping off Matheson's script. I think it was a logical thing to do. I think it was just something they independently came up with myself. So we get that, and then after that we move into the Ruth stuff, because he's going out to bury the dog, and he sees her across the field.
Yeah.
Now this stuff, I think for the most part, it's well done.
Yeah, I think some of it is good.
Like the scenes where he has her at his house and he's being really paranoid, that works.
Yeah, the paranoia stuff works. The very first moment where he's like, where he meets her and he practically beats her unconscious.
That's from the book.
I know it's from the book, but I didn't even like it in the book.
Well, he didn't beat her unconscious. She hits him, kicks him, and then he pimp slaps her.
Yeah, but it's still, I don't know, just something about it. I just don't like the way.
Yeah.
I just don't think he would encounter another human being like that.
No, I think the idea they're going for is that he hasn't seen another human being in so long he doesn't know how to interact.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a little weird.
Yeah.
And they do that scene in the Vincent Price movie, and what's funny is that he just kind of chases her down and grabs her. And then later on, though, when she's berating him, she says, "You chased me across the field. Hit me." I'm like, you didn't hit her. Plot hole.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like, the script is contradicting the movie.
Clearly, they wanted to do something, but they didn't have probably the confidence to do that.
Yeah. Although it was the 60s, so.
And
it is Italy. I mean.
Oh yeah.
Maybe Vincent Price just didn't want to slap a woman. I don't know.
That's understandable, I guess.
Yes. But yeah, so you get the scenes in the house, which are pretty good, and it's better than Last Man on Earth, where they rush through the whole "you are one of them, aren't you" thing.
Yeah, the stuff with Ruth is really quick in the film.
It's because it's only like a 80-minute movie, and
I know.
it's a 90-minute movie, and they had to save room for a foot chase.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Not quite Jason Bourne style foot chase.
It's a lot quicker than it should be, basically.
In that movie. But here it's done pretty well. Now, I don't buy the whole they fall in love thing.
Yeah, that's really forced.
But I never quite bought that in the book either.
Well, I just think the whole idea of it is kind of ludicrous.
I do think it's kind of funny that, he wakes up from dreaming about his vampire wife and goes, "Let's bang."
Yeah, and it's so out of the blue. And all I was thinking was like, Stockholm Syndrome? What the hell?
Yes, and then he checks her blood and finds out that she is indeed infected.
And
then she gets away, but she tells him basically what's going on with the whole new society and then gets away.
Yeah.
And then he goes back into drunk phase.
Yeah, he becomes another depressed again.
Which it took me 3 times reading this to pick up on the fact that he has a fully stocked bar in his house.
Yeah.
But then again, I guess it is the 50s.
Yeah, I guess even if it wasn't the apocalypse, he would have that.
He could be a character on Mad Men.
Yeah.
And so yeah, he goes into drunk mode and just forgets to close the door or turn the fence on. And I can understand him doing this.
Yeah, that was believable.
Because he thinks that they're going to come and kill him.
Yeah.
But then Cortman and the vampires get over the fence, and so they come in. Neville snaps to action. He tries to get to his guns, but he can't. And by the way, I like the idea that he takes a gun with him when he leaves the house, not to shoot the vampires, but to kill himself if he can't get away.
Yeah, that was well done.
But he can't get to the gun, and he ends up getting chased by Cortman into the bedroom, which was converted into his machine shop where he makes the steaks.
Yeah.
And so Cortman actually shuts the door and locks it to keep the other vampires from getting him, and they have their little struggle.
That was kind of a sinister moment.
And he gets staked by the lathing chisel. Which I actually really like that they gave them a little confrontation there in this, because in the book, the neo-fascists, they show up and they shred Cortman with gunfire and then pike him to death.
Yeah.
And I like the idea that their sort of rivalry here has a conclusion.
Yeah, it gives that, because he's been hounding him the whole thing, and it's like that needed to be sorted out mano y mano, you know?
You know, it was a personal thing, and I like the idea of it being a friend who turns into his ultimate enemy.
Yeah,
Because, you know, as Samuel L. Jackson says in Unbreakable, they're often friends, like you and me.
yeah, exactly.
Which is a great movie, by the way. But
Yeah.
but yeah, but it makes sense. It's a nice sort of mirror image thing that happens.
Mm.
And then this is where the script kind of falls on its ass.
It goes Sunshine Hollywood, doesn't it?
Not completely, but a little bit.
Well, from what my thoughts were, is it's doing the book's ending, but without any of the balls.
Yes, but it still tries to be a little bit dark because the neo-fascists come in, they've killed the other vampires, and Ruth says that most of us want to kill you, but we can't because your immune blood is too valuable to us, which doesn't make sense because they don't really need it because they've learned to live with the infection.
Yeah, it's like, why do you need a cure? You don't care.
No, you don't. And so they drag him off in the back of their I imagine it being like a fascist Mercedes.
Right.
And they drive off, and that's the end of the script. He's just like horrified. He's like, I can't leave my house, which I'll admit that was an effective moment for me. He's just going like, my house.
Yeah.
But it did feel somewhat devastating, so it doesn't completely lack the punch.
No, but it was kind of jarring that it just stops right there.
Yes, it is. It feels like it's missing the ending.
It does. It just feels like they chopped the ending off from the book.
Now, Matheson has said that he was more willing to compromise in adapting his own work when he did, because this was like the first script he wrote, I think. And so he was more willing to take notes, and Hammer asked him to soften the ending, which is surprising as hell to me, considering Hammer made Curse of Frankenstein,
Yeah.
which has a really bleak ending for 1957.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. I mean, it's Hammer horror.
And even that ending, that's a weird ending because that actually makes me feel sorry for Peter Cushing's Frankenstein because
Right, yeah.
he's the villain of the piece and he gets framed for everyone's murders.
Right.
And gets his head chopped off. And I'm like, and the two people who know he's innocent are just like not saying, well, innocent in a sense, aren't saying anything because, let's face it, his assistant in that movie was an asshole.
Right.
But yeah, so this script, aside from that ending and a few flaws throughout, this would have been really solid.
Yeah, and a almost near perfect adaptation as well.
Yeah, which Matheson has done. My understanding is that Incredible Shrinking Man is very close.
Right, okay.
And he adapted Legend of Hell House, and that's actually pretty close, but like I said, they ran into a problem at the end, and they reset it in England for some reason. I think it was for like budget reasons because it was cheaper to film there.
Plus, England is extra scary.
I guess so. Yeah, but the book was set in Maine, and we know from Stephen King that Maine is the scariest place in the world.
Oh, of course.
Along with all of New England, if you count Lovecraft. But yeah, it's a pretty strong script on the whole. I mean, some of the formatting I thought was a little annoying, but that's probably more because of whoever typed it up for the book I got it from.
Yeah.
And so yeah, there's that. And what happened with this was that Hammer, this was written in 1957, and if what I'm remembering was correct, Curse of Frankenstein was already out, and they were making Horror of Dracula. So this would have been the third Hammer film. Hammer horror film, well, unless you count the two Quatermass movies that came before, which are really the beginning. But this...
it's the heyday, basically, isn't it?
It's the beginning of the heyday, of them being the new Universal.
Yeah.
And this would have changed them a lot. Like, I don't think they would have made as many Dracula movies or as many Frankensteins. I think they would have branched out a little more.
Oh, yeah, they would have focused more on stuff like that script, and would have, instead of just cranking out the same, let's be honest, crap.
Entertaining crap, but still crap.
Yeah. They would have probably focused on branching out a bit more.
Now, what ended up happening with this is that they submitted the script to both the British and American censors, and they said, if you make it exactly like this, we won't pass it. Which I didn't think they were allowed to do, but okay, the book I have reprints the letter from the MPAA, and it was submitted to the office on November 25th, 1957. Thanksgiving, maybe. And most of the things they complain about are the word damned should be dropped.
What?
The expression, oh God, could not be approved. They object to hell, damn smart, oh god again. The burning of the body should be handled with extreme care. Note the stake driving on this page, even though a ton of vampire movies before this did stakings with no problems.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a load of Dracula movies that did that.
Even early ones.
Yeah.
The expressions bastards and mother's son of you could not be approved.
What?
Brutality and gruesomeness throughout Neville's fight with the vampires. This isn't that gruesome, even by 57 standards.
No, it's pretty tame.
Brutality and gruesomeness as the vampires attack Neville. Also the expression, you bastards.
Well, I can just imagine them, like, watching a Hellraiser movie and their heads exploding.
Gruesomeness at the bottom of this page. Gruesomeness as the vampire attacks Neville's throat. My god, damn it. The retching in this scene could prove troublesome. And that's
that's a sentence.
And that's the retching. It's not even on-screen retching. It's when he puts the garlic in Ruth's face and she gets sick and runs into the bathroom and you hear her puking.
Yeah.
Wow. And then, within the framework of this type of story, we could not approve the indication of an illicit relationship between Neville and Ruth. Such an indication is quite clear on this page and should be avoided.
Well, what are they trying to say there? That there seems to be a lot of subtext there.
They didn't want fornication in the movies.
Wow.
Remember, there was a period in American history where they were not allowed to show couples sleeping in the same bed on film.
That's weird. This is something I've never experienced because in Britain we never really had that. So
you've had censorship issues of your own.
Yeah, we've had different things, but it's never been like that.
But yeah, under the Hays Code, married couples had to sleep in separate beds.
Wow.
Like they would have like twin beds in their bedroom. I've seen that in like Three Stooges shorts and everything. And I love this guy who works for the MPAA. His name is Jeffrey M. Sherlock. Sherlock with a U instead of an E.
So people can actually say no shit Sherlock to him.
Yep. Now this was Hammer. They're going to have it directed by Val Guest, whom he directed the first two Quatermass movies, which I think are very good. And they have a sort of they're in black and white, and they have a very much a documentary feel to them.
Is one of them Quatermass in the Pit?
No, that was a later one.
Oh, okay. That's the only one I know, unfortunately.
That's the one that they made later in like the late 60s.
Right.
Which
okay.
That's the best one.
Yeah.
And the original serial is great as well. But no, he directed the first two, which the Quatermass Experiment, which had a guy going into space and turning into like a fungus monster, which that's actually really good. And Quatermass 2, I think it's called. That one has to do with like aliens taking over a base on Earth. It was pretty good. But he brought this sort of down-to-earth kind of grim documentary style to it, and I think that would have worked really well for this material.
Yeah, I was just about to say that kind of atmosphere would have worked perfectly.
Because when I first heard, Hammer, I Am Legend, I was thinking, oh, like a Terrence Fisher Technicolor, hugely stylistic look to it, which would be different but would still be interesting. But reading, the setting and the director and what he did, I kept wondering if maybe they would have... That gave me a totally different picture of what it would have looked like.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine that being like really subdued colors and just this, like you said, documentary feel to the whole thing, which would have made it a really interesting atmosphere and perfect for the adaptation.
Yes, and it fits Matheson's style just like a glove.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I wondered if he would have cast Brian Donlevy as Neville, because he played Quatermass in those movies, and he's kind of notorious for being the American playing a Brit.
Yeah, I could see that. I know who you mean, yeah.
Yeah, and it also fits in a way because he was known for his boozing. And there's an anecdote that the director told about how he was very professional on set, but they had an incident where they were giving him flasks full of black coffee, and he would start lacing it with alcohol.
Oh God.
So yeah, he would be the perfect method actor to play Robert Neville.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be interesting, and it got killed by censorship issues. And so Hammer, which I don't understand why they would pass Curse of Frankenstein, which has obvious adultery in it, is much more gruesome than this.
It is weird how, when you look at what they did approve, is crazy.
Like, I mean, I'd say Curse of Frankenstein is a very unpleasant movie for its time. Yeah. Just in the nastiness of it. Yes, and so, but what's interesting is that the title Night Creatures survived as something of an artifact. because they owed the U.S. distributor a movie called Night Creatures. So they took Captain Clegg, which is a period mystery drama piece, and they called it Night Creatures for the U.S. release. And I actually like that movie.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, one of Oliver Reed's first on-screen roles.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
Yeah, I believe his first starring role was Curse of the Werewolf.
Huh.
Yeah, so I'm imagining Oliver Reed playing Neville.
I mean, yeah. I mean, that would work.
You bloody vampire bastards! So yeah, Oliver Reed as Robert Neville. That would be cool.
Yeah, that would definitely work.
So yeah, that fell apart, and eventually what happened is that the script, they sold it off to an American producer who told Richard Matheson that it would be rewritten, but that they would get Fritz Lang to direct it.
I don't know him.
He did M, the Peter Lorre movie where he plays a serial killer.
Oh, Christ.
He's a brilliant director, and he would have done it justice, but of course they couldn't get him. He did Metropolis too.
Oh, okay.
But no, instead they sold it off to they made it cheaply with a bunch of Italians with Vincent Price.
Yeah.
And we got an interesting movie that's not that great.
I mean, it's ingrained in popular culture. You have to admit that.
Yes, it is an interesting one. It's one that you can get really easily because it's in every public domain movie compilation ever assembled.
Yeah, it's in like those 50 movies for $1 pack.
Along with Night of the Living Dead, sadly enough.
Yeah, that's just wrong.
Yes, and so moving on, there were a few more attempts around the time of Omega Man where Hammer wanted to try again in the late 60s. But there were issues with the copyright where the rights to the script and the rights to the book were owned by different people. And eventually Warner Brothers won out and made Omega Man. And also Dan Curtis, the TV producer, wanted to do a book faithful version in the 70s, and he and Matheson worked together on a Dracula TV movie, and they also created the Night Stalker together.
Huh.
So that would have been interesting to see. Dan Curtis was also the guy behind Dark Shadows.
Oh, okay.
So that would have been a really interesting version if that came off the ground.
Yeah, that would have been really interesting.
And so Warner Brothers, they had the movie rights after Omega Man, and they kind of sat on it for a while. Eventually, sci-fi and horror came back in the 90s for several reasons, and so they wanted to make another version of it. Enter Mark Protosevich, who he made waves in Hollywood because a lot of studios really liked his spec script, The Cell, which became that J-Lo movie.
Ugh,
which I don't really blame Protosevich for that because it was Tarsem Singh who cast Jennifer Lopez, let's be honest.
Yeah, a lot of the weirder stuff in that is definitely the director.
And I think it was him who, Protosevich has said that he was the one who went with the heavily visual angle to it.
Yeah, because he's one of those directors,
I really want to see that movie just out of curiosity because Vincent D'Onofrio as a serial killer? Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting, but I think a lot of it is it's just it goes too much into the whole. I think I've used this phrase for meta wank at the audience's expense.
Yes. But yeah, Protosevich, he was offered, because The Cell made waves, he was offered 3 different projects he could work on, one of which was I Am Legend, and he said, I don't even need to know what the other 2 are, because he was a big fan of the book and he loved Omega Man as well.
Okay, I mean, that's fair enough.
And this one is a bit different in that it's weirdly how do I describe this? It's like a distant ancestor of the Will Smith movie to a point where it almost feels kind of incestuous.
It is weird how on the nose some scenes are.
It's like, wow, that is almost directly from the Will Smith movie.
Yeah, it's basically I when I was reading it, I thought it was like a combination of the first script and the Will Smith movie. If you mash those two together clumsily.
Because there's a number of things that come from the original novel in here, and I kind of went, ooh, that's cool, but it has sort of its own vibe to it.
Yeah.
And the way this one goes is that we get the origin story of the infection in this, where it's a virus mixed with a blood cell created by this cancer research group to cure cancer, which that's
similar to the film as well, with the Crippen virus, isn't it?
Yes, and it's Crippen in this too, because it's just not Emma Thompson for 5 minutes.
No, that was a weird cameo when I saw that. I was like, holy shit, that's Emma Thompson.
I wonder how much she got paid for that.
Shit done.
More than Will Smith, maybe. But yeah, so you get more detail on that in this, and that there was the Crippen 10 who became the first hemocytes, as they're called in this, and then the infection spread, but the way it spread in this isn't clarified very well because I don't know if I don't think they ever say it's airborne here.
No, they I don't think they do. No,
It's not specified.
it's kind of inconsistent.
Yeah, yeah, it's a little inconsistent because that part's never really explained for all the
Yeah,
explaining they do. And so Robert Neville this is all taking place in the San Francisco Bay Area, and it's all pretty interestingly described, I think.
yeah.
They give you a good picture of that area.
Oh yeah, and especially the compound as well.
Yeah, the compound, which is on top of a hill.
Yeah,
And all I could imagine was that he's 4 houses down from the Full house.
yeah,
And that's one of the houses he burned down. Although I think he's in a better neighborhood than that.
yeah. It did sound like it was quite high up and all that.
It was a rich neighborhood. He's literally on top of a hill. And so it's in the San Francisco Bay Area, and Robert Neville was a history professor at Berkeley, which is unintentionally funny when you hear about who they wanted to play Neville.
Yeah.
So he was a history professor at Berkeley who he had his interactions with Crippen, and now he's doing his thing where he scavenges during the day and he has his dog with him, and he has his ludicrously high-tech base compound at night with double perimeters, and literally everything he needs is inside this compound.
Yeah, and he's actually set up freaking landmines.
Yes.
It's crazy.
It's like when he goes out, he brings like small explosives with him.
I kind of skimmed over this a little bit, but it kind of felt like he had like some kind of contingency nuclear warhead under the base that would just obliterate everything.
Well, it wasn't a warhead, but he had like something. It was like a last resort thing where it would blow up the entire area.
Yeah, I just say warhead because it just seemed like something cataclysmically huge.
Which was a plot point from I Am Omega, where he's putting these little tiny explosive devices on all the gas mains.
Yeah.
Which was stupid, but that whole movie was stupid. But so yeah, he's now, he's this hardened, almost psychopathic guy in a sense.
Yeah.
Where he's leaving, the radio message saying, "Meet me at Golden Gate Park every day when the sun is highest in the sky," which is exactly from the Will Smith movie, except it's
the exact speech.
Except San Francisco instead of New York.
Yeah. Although one thing I found interesting is that it sets up that he's calling out to people to come and meet him, but he's kind of a prick.
Yeah, he's like dropping F-bombs on them. Like he says 1-800-FUCKYOU.
Yeah, he's just a massive dick, and there's nothing really endearing about the character. I mean, when you watch Will Smith, he's quite an endearing, caring character, but this guy's just a dick who's doing whatever the hell he wants, and he's not even doing it for any reason as well. He just goes out and just fucks about with things.
It's interesting the way he's characterized here, because I do find him to be an interesting character who's just broken by what's going on around him.
Yeah.
But he just reacts in a really dickish fashion. And you get the implication that he goes after the hemocytes, which I can tell you're just cringing every time I say that.
Oh, yeah.
Not because he has to survive, but because he's lost everything and he hates them and he enjoys killing them.
Well,
and as a consequence of that, them and their leader, Ben Cortman, are surrounding him at night and trying to get into his compound and kill him.
Yeah, and that was crazy as well, because it was like something out of Mad Max.
Yeah, it was inspired by Zulu, I think.
Yeah, because they like set up they just drum and chant. Because it's like this whole tribal structure,
yes,
isn't it?
And they have a whole structure with caretakers, drummers, clerics, warriors, and then Cortman. And that's all really interesting. I like that they have their own culture.
I do think it was a bit too much, though.
Yeah, they show too much of them too early.
Yeah.
But that's all interesting, and you get this whole backstory about how Cortman was one of the Crippen 10.
Oh, he was patient 1, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was patient 1, although he was the blood cancer one, and they had already treated lung cancer, so I don't know how he's patient 1, but...
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, that's a bit of a hole there, but... So yeah, they surround him, and they refer to him as the devil.
Yeah.
And it's because he is killing them for no other reason than because he feels like he has to.
But it is kind of weird how Cortman's right-hand man basically... Because Cortman says, we're going to kill this man even if it kills us. And the guy says, dude, that's fucking stupid.
Yeah, because it's like no one wants to challenge him, though, because he's really strong and powerful.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird disconnect for me.
Now, my problem with that, though, is that I would have preferred to just keep it on Neville's perspective,
Yes.
where it's like you're hitting in the house, you can hear them chanting, and you maybe see shots of them standing, or you can see shots of Cortman sort of, gesturing and sending
Arguing
them
and
in.
shouting and stuff.
But
Yeah.
you don't learn anything about them or how cultured they really are
Yeah.
until the third act.
Something like you'd have Neville on the roof just looking through binoculars, and he can see them talking, he just can't hear them.
And maybe Neville has an idea, but the audience doesn't know.
Exactly.
Because you have to take the audience into account when you do something like that. And so you have some pretty damn solid action scenes here.
Yeah.
Where you have them attacking the compound, which is pretty cool. You have the first one where he goes down to the city and gets attacked by an independent Hemocyte sniper.
Oh yeah, I mean, I thought that was a bit weird because, I mean, it was like right off the bat, they just basically said, okay, these enemies are basically human. This is kind of odd and not particularly heroic.
Although they were killing him for basically no reason.
Yeah, they were, and it makes Neville the good guy in that situation, but it immediately brings in that sort of moral ambiguity into it.
Yes, which should have been saved for later.
Yeah, exactly. And it's immediate. It's like the first thing that happened.
Yeah, so that was a pretty good scene though, because I liked how they slowly established what this Hemocyte is.
Yeah.
By like his clothing slowly coming off and then he burns. We should talk about the Hemocytes in general in this. Because they're called Hemocytes because they were created through blood cells. That's what Hemocyte means.
Yes.
And so they're strong, they're muscular, they're pale, and they shrivel in sunlight, and there's only a few ways which you can kill them, one of which is shooting them in the heart.
Yeah, and for some reason drowning, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. There was a few of them. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But the script goes to very great lengths to explain a lot of things about this virus. It doesn't leaves certain things unsaid and kind of vague.
Yeah, but the biggest change I found was that when they drink blood, they kind of become like the Hulk.
Yes, and they can psychically summon the blood to them to heal. They get Wolverine healing.
Yeah, it's like the T-1000. It's crazy.
Yes, because there's all this effort to ground it in real science, and then that happens.
Yeah, I was like, did I read that right? What?
That just feels weird. Like, why can't they just drink the blood?
Yeah, I mean, that would have been more gruesome as well if the guy was running after his own blood, licking it off the ground.
Yes, that would have been weird as hell.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I find interesting is that about the society they have set up is that the genders are more or less equal. Because one of the right hand, like the leader of the warriors is a woman.
Well, I would say the genders of the Hemocytes are equal.
We'll get to that.
We'll get into that.
Because that's kind of darkly ridiculous. The way that happens in context is kind of darkly humorous. But so yeah, you get Neville and his dog, and he has I like how everything here has a very specific function. How he's like attached a crow's nest to his house, and how he sends the dog out to patrol the inner perimeter and stuff, and it can get back inside the house. And he's very cold towards the dog, but you get the idea that there is an emotional connection there. It's just he's really deeply suppressing it.
Yeah, I think
they do have their tender moments, but he's also a dick to it.
Yeah, well, I think he starts out as quite the dick to the dog, but it gets there eventually. But I don't think it's given enough weight because I mean, obviously the dog dies, and spoiler, who cares? But I think there's not enough emotional connection before that, so it feels a bit ham-fisted.
There is a little bit, but it could have been done a little better. And
yeah, exactly.
The Will Smith movie does that better.
Oh yeah, the Will Smith does it perfectly.
Having him just snap the dog's neck in his hands, that's just devastating.
Yeah, and it's brilliantly acted as well because there's no music, there's no sound. You just hear the dog snarling and then nothing.
It's focused on his face the entire time.
Yeah,
which
it's perfect.
Shows what a crazy underrated actor Will Smith really is.
Oh yeah.
But the whole thing with the dog here, I like how, the dog actually has its function. And the impression I get from some of the dickishness is that he does say that he's had many dogs over the years.
Right, yeah.
And that but this one was particularly good for whatever reason. And I like that, and the way the dog gets attacked in this, it's very similar to the Will Smith movie in that he gets caught in one of his snares.
Yeah,
And
but it's actually stupid because it's just his own snare, isn't
yes,
it?
it's a snare he literally just set like a second ago, and he
It's
steps
stupid.
into it, and then the Hemocyte dogs show up.
Yeah, and at that point, it's pretty much exactly like the film. He,
Only he gets injured way worse.
oh yeah, but doesn't he get the knife stuck in his leg like he does in the film as well?
Yes, he does. But first of all, the wire on the snare is cutting into
Oh yeah,
his
yeah,
ankle, even though it says he has boots on. So
yeah. I mean, doesn't he have like that protective suit as well?
yeah, I don't get that.
He's
But
basically got like a Kevlar diver suit.
yeah, so what's happening is that's cutting into his ankle, and he goes to cut the wire and it works, and he falls on the knife, gets that in his leg, and he also breaks his wrist.
Yeah,
And I'm like, damn, how does he do all this stuff he does in the next few hours?
yeah.
I mean, I broke my wrist once, and that hurt like a bitch. But yeah, so they fight off the Hemocyte dogs, which are color coded.
Oh yeah, I thought that was funny.
That I'm like, you didn't need to make. It's interesting that they're individual and they're all different breeds, but you didn't need to be that detailed with it.
Yeah, it was a bit too specific. I don't think we needed to really. We didn't really need to know which dog was biting where at which specific moment. You
No,
know?
no. And then the dog and his dog, which is never named in this, which is odd.
Oh yeah, that was weird.
It's just dog.
Yeah.
And it gets attacked, and he swears he drives it home, even though he's been stuck out after dark. And the bit where he manages to get back into the compound with the Hemocytes surrounding it was pretty badass.
Yeah, that was
he,
pretty
he
epic.
lights up a bunch of gas at the gate and then sets it on fire and drives through.
Yeah.
Oh yes, and then the ones that cling to his Land Rover, I think it is, and they get inside, he just turns on the halogen lights.
Yeah.
And then
And
the one that survives, the next morning, even though he's got a broken wrist, he just goes, "Oh, screw this," and just drags it into the sunlight.
yeah, he literally grabs it round the neck and just drags it out. Talking about them attacking the compound, I don't know if it's after he gets back with the dog or before, but like a female
This was
Hemocyte.
before. This is the first time we see them attack.
Oh yeah, because it's really weird how a female Hemocyte gets into the compound and she just acts really sexy to him just to get close to him and kill him.
And it works almost.
Yeah,
And then the dog
it's
saves his life. Yeah, I didn't like that.
yeah, it's kind of weird.
It's referencing the thing in the book where they would like strip and beckon to him,
Yeah,
but
that's what I thought.
he was smart enough not to run out the door in the book.
Yeah,
He wasn't a complete idiot.
yeah, and I guess I mean in the script kind of did it okay
It did okay, but it's like
about the fact that he's still almost mid battle.
and it's an albino bald woman
Yeah, so I don't think it doesn't really make much sense.
covered in warrior tattoos because they are really into tattooing and graffiti and stuff.
Oh yeah, and like they got a specific brand as well.
Yeah, which is the logo of the Crippen lab, you find out. And so, yeah, but that part, and the dog saves his life, and that sort of solidified the bond, I guess.
Yeah,
But then,
that's when the emotional stuff starts working its way in.
yes, and so then he's trying to save the dog's life in the medical center, and it's not working. And so he decides he's going to go up to Berkeley to Crippen's lab and figure out what's going on. By the way, before the night ended, Cortman finally agreed that they needed to find a different approach to getting to Neville. That's setting something up for later.
Yeah, I mean, if you know the book, if you know all the other films, it's not that much of a surprise.
No, it's not that much, but it was interesting still.
It was interesting and well done, actually.
And so he goes to Berkeley, and this is where you get the beginning of a lot of plot exposition about the virus, which I don't think we needed as much as we got.
Right, yeah. It does go into a lot of detail. It's just not necessary.
Because I think the first set of exposition we get was fine enough, and then it just keeps giving us more as it goes along, and it's like we don't need that much. And the whole idea that Neville went there because his daughter already had cancer, and he wanted to try the experiment on her, that doesn't really add much.
No, and I did find it weird how Crippen was just an absolute prick to him.
I got the idea that Crippen was in it for the media coverage.
Yeah, because he was just basically like, oh, I can't do anything. Here's a doctor I know.
Now imagine that scene acted by Emma Thompson.
I can't.
I can't see her being that much of a bitch.
No, and I think it kind of undermines it as well because I think it works better if Crippen isn't a dick.
Yeah.
And he's actually trying to help humanity, and it's just a massive accident. But if he's a prick, then you kind of lose sympathy for the guy, you know?
Yes. And then between, the stuff he finds there, the tapes Neville already has at his house,
Yeah.
he sort of you sort of get the picture of what happened, and basically he finds out that he really has no way of saving the dog.
Yeah, and it's a long time until you realize that when it's pretty obvious.
Yes. Although I do like the idea that he's trying everything he can because, he's not a scientist here. He didn't study it before.
Yeah.
No, I do like the idea that Neville is keeping all these tapes around because, he wants to keep a historical record.
Mm.
Now, where the hell he got half of these things, I don't know.
Yeah, he just has them.
And the fact that Arnold signed on based on this script
Plexes me.
Just imagine, because this is very much the action movie,
I guess.
I Am Legend, but just imagine History Professor Arnold.
Him in like a tweed jacket that's way too big.
It's almost like Junior all over again.
Yeah, it really is. And he's got the little glasses on, and it's just ridiculous.
Today, students, we're going to talk about the War of the Austrian Succession.
And yeah, it's like Keanu Reeves playing a nuclear scientist.
But yeah, just Arnold, and especially since they specifically describe Neville in this as having the body more of a track athlete than of a bodybuilder.
Yeah, they go into kind of weird detail about how toned he is.
And how toned the hemocytes are.
Yeah, they really focus on that.
Like, honestly, the way this is played, I'd rather see Arnold as Ben Cortman from this script.
Yeah, because, he does sound like that. He's bulkier.
Yeah, we don't get to see Arnold play a villain nearly enough.
And of course, the script does go into detail about how all the female hemocytes are naked.
Well, the males are too. They're all shirtless.
Yeah, but it specifically says about the females that are naked.
Well, it's an eye candy blockbuster. Certain things just...
Yeah, I don't think that would have gone through, though, because, I don't know, it just seems a bit odd, the way how specific they are.
Yes.
But anyway.
So yeah, you have that, and then for the next several days because what happens with the dog is that he finds out that he has to let it die and then feed it more blood, and that's when it comes back.
Weird.
It was weird and a little confusing, but basically what it is that he can't bring himself to end it. So he lets it live and then takes it out to way out to I believe it's at Land's End, they say, which is a real place on the on the coast of San Francisco, even though I looked at Bing Maps and there's no lighthouse there. But yeah, he lets it out there and then leaves it, which is setting up for the ending, where basically it comes back and it's taken over a horde of hemocyte dogs and it sort of, lets them go.
Yeah, it's weird.
Which was an interesting moment, but it just didn't quite work.
Yeah, well, it didn't quite work, but it didn't add anything either.
Protosevich has said the idea was that it's peace can be had or something. Although that idea comes across in a different way earlier, so he didn't need that.
Yeah, and it comes off really badly as well.
Yeah. It was alright, the thing with the dog, but I think the dog in the Will Smith movie works better, because I don't care about what all those pansies say who need a special psych to tell them whether the dog dies. That's a thing that really works in the movie. Especially when it's done well, because damn, that dog was a good actor too.
Yeah, the dog was really good, and you really felt for it, and because it helped that it was in the flashbacks as well, I think.
Yes, that too, because it was the little puppy. So yeah, that happens, and then he kind of, loses track of himself. He's just sort of going through the motions, but he notices the hemocytes aren't showing up. And then he goes back to Golden Gate Park, and he finds one of his leaflets with a message written on the back saying, "Where are you? I've been looking for you."
Yeah.
And so he adds his own message. He gets his crap back together. The way they handled the alcoholism here I liked, because it shows that he's about to start drinking again. Then he watches one of his video diaries of himself as he's really drunk and just in a bad place. And I thought that worked well. And he just pours the alcohol out. I thought that worked.
Yeah, it worked because it didn't bash you over the head with it.
Yeah.
It got out what it needed to say, and it worked for the character.
Mm-hmm. And so he ends up going back there the next day, and it's a woman who is hidden where he didn't find her, and she has a gun to his head, and he knocks her out and takes her back.
Yeah.
And locks her up in the medical center in a cage he built overnight, apparently.
Yeah, that was weird.
And she's Anna, who is a morphine addict, and she's an early version of Anna from the movie.
Yeah.
From the Will Smith movie, only here she's kind of a bitch.
Yeah, she's a bitch in ridiculous ways because she wanted to contact him, and now she's pissed off and pointing a gun at him, and it makes no sense. The whole morphine addict thing was kind of weird.
Yeah, it doesn't really make sense in this context.
To me, um, I mean, again, spoilers, but it's not really a thing. She's obviously working with Cortman.
She's a spy for the hemocytes.
Yeah, and I kind of thought that she was taking the morphine to hide the virus, but she's not even a vampire.
No, which I don't think that would have worked the way they're described here.
No, but that's what I kind of thought they were going for.
Which even in the book, I didn't buy the way she hides it, where she just puts makeup on.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
But so yeah, he takes her back. He detoxes her.
Yeah, he gives her
he gives her
detoxing drugs that can give her a heart attack, but it's fine. He's monitoring her,
and he strips her and gives her a bath.
Of course.
Which was just weird.
Yes.
Which would be the single creepiest Arnold Schwarzenegger scene ever put in the film. Forget the Terminator. God. Forget the original Terminator. This is the scariest thing Arnold has ever done.
Yeah, just imagine Arnold Schwarzenegger, little glasses, and you've got a 19-year-old girl naked getting a sponge bath unconscious.
Yes, they specifically point out that he's 42 and she's 19.
Yeah, it's wrong.
Which makes the sexual relationship they form a little weird, but it is the end of the world. So, but yeah, but I mean, I kind of get because they think he thinks she's the only other human left alive, so it kind of makes sense he would kind of fall into that. And then the thing with him putting her in his wife's nightgown is a little Vertigo-ish.
That was where I was going. Okay, where the hell is this going now?
Is Robert Neville really a crazy person?
Yeah,
he is a crazy person, but not. We didn't know if he was at that level.
It gets a bit too close to the creepy side for me.
So there's more of her being a bitch.
Yeah.
But then eventually they sort of overcome their differences. And we get, I should mention, we did get more flashbacks about his daughter dying and then his wife dying. He gets this in like a dream. And then he dreams about her leading a pack of hemocytes knocking down the door and coming to kill him, which that was pretty effective in a different way.
How appropriate.
But I prefer Matheson's version where it's just she's just sort of scraping at the door. Sorry, I had to get another Nick Cage reference in there somewhere.
Yes. I think the Matheson version is a lot creepier.
It's a lot creepier, but this is kind of like an oh my god, oh shit moment.
Yeah.
Now, how interesting would it be if they did a version of this where the main hemocyte antagonist was in fact his wife?
Yeah, I was surprised that didn't come up more frequently.
It doesn't come up in any of the other versions either, I don't think.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that seems like such a big thing to miss. I mean that's almost right. Sorry, that almost writes itself.
This is a terrible example, but it's the closest thing I can think of. The Total Recall remake, where the wife kind of becomes like the secondary villain of the piece.
Yeah.
Which that was one of the few interesting ideas that movie had. But yeah, that would be interesting. But that was a side note. They get over after that dream. They get over their differences, and him and Anna fuck.
Yeah, it's
all day long too.
Yeah, and again, 40-year-old and a 19-year-old. I mean, it's the apocalypse, but it's still a movie.
Yeah.
And
Arnold. I'm just imagining Arnold and some tiny little teenage girl.
Jesus.
Who was a popular teenage actress at the time?
What year would this be?
This was written in 96.
96. Oh God.
Like Sabrina?
Oh no.
No, Melissa Joan Hart. No, please.
No. Oh. I'm blanking.
This episode got to a really creepy place.
Would it be Winona Ryder?
She was older at the time, but then again, it's always like a 30-year-old playing teenagers anyway, so yeah, it might have been her.
Yeah, I don't think they would have actually had a 19-year-old.
No, they wouldn't. They don't do that now. Well, they did have a 12-year-old playing Hit Girl.
Oh yeah, but
that was awesome.
That was awesome.
This is not.
No. This is a very different.
It's
different
just
scenario.
weird. It's like they barely know each other, and it just okay. This joke I saw someone wrote where he said, and then it's like they wrote an ending sentence for a story, and then they both fucked.
Yeah, it does feel like that. It's just so out of the blue. But you could also argue that's because she's a spy.
Well, on her part that makes sense, but on his part,
yeah,
I would expect more reluctance because he's paranoid as hell in this.
Yeah, and then he just fucks it all away.
But they have their first date after they fuck. That's a little. I'm like, you got it in the wrong order there, Neville.
Yeah.
But they have that romantic candlelit dinner, and there's a bunch of little hints where he's showing her all the things in the house.
Yeah, and he even says that he showed someone else this and it fucked him over.
Yeah, he took one of the hemocytes inside the house, showed them the. Basically, it is that he showed them the self-destruct thing and then let them out so that they would know, and he compares it to the Cold War.
Oh yeah, that's right. It was intentional. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't fuck him over.
Yeah, you skimmed through a lot of this part.
No, I didn't. Yeah, but no, I did get the basics, and it's like, yeah, because of the big bomb under the thing, but it kind of doesn't make sense as well because Cortman doesn't seem to give a shit about his people dying.
No.
So why wouldn't he just do it anyway?
Yeah, he doesn't give a shit, yet he gives a shit that Neville kills them, but he doesn't give a shit they get killed because he keeps putting them in that position.
Yeah, it's weird.
Dude's a hypocrite. But basically,
it's very badly written, in my opinion.
There's all these weird little things going on, like a parka ends up on his fence. The hemocytes still aren't showing up, and then you see her looking out over the horizon anxiously.
Yeah, and she uses a scarf as a signal. Or something.
Yeah, the second time she ties a scarf in the crow's nest, and then at their candlelit dinner, she drugs him.
Which is... You kind of saw that coming.
And then she destroys his security and stuff, and the hemocytes get in, and Neville, proving he is a badass, even though he's been heavily drugged, he still manages to fight pretty well.
Yeah, he's like... Basically, half his body is now numb, but he's like crawling around and doing proper action movie stuff.
Now that's the Arnold moment right there.
Yeah, it definitely was. Then that was like Commando.
Yes, that was actually pretty cool. But yeah, they end up getting him, and I like the hallucinatory sequence where you get flashes of them dragging him away, and they drag him into their lair. That was really cool.
Don't they like they crucify him or something?
Yeah, they like hang him up on like some pipes, on like a pipe or something.
And they just parade him around.
It's like a telephone pole. It reminded me of Bride of Frankenstein when they tie up the monster to that tree, which has no leaves for some reason. Before we go on to this next part, we should mention that throughout the script, Neville is shown having this all-in-one tool, which has all these different edges on it, and he's like Blade and his sunglasses. This all-in-one tool are Blade's sunglasses, because they talk about the Blade movies that whenever he doesn't have his sunglasses, he's helpless.
Yeah.
But whenever he does have them, he's a badass. Neville here, whenever he gets fucked over in this script, he doesn't have the all-in-one tool.
Yeah.
And that's important for later. So they drag him down to their lair, and they string him up on the pipes. Yeah. And Cortman goes on this big villain speech, and then he reveals that they have hemocyte children down there.
Yeah, he's all like self-righteous and saying, "Look at the society you're destroying."
Yeah, look how many fathers, wives, sons you have killed, and Neville is actually kind of struck by it.
Yeah, he's actually affected, and he starts to understand.
And that's a good moment. And then, do you want to do it?
I kind of do.
You do it.
Yeah, basically, Anna comes up to him and says, "Give me back Ethan," which is the boy from the film.
Brother here.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And he has a point here.
Yeah, and again, we're still reeling from this idea that they're a society. And then Cortman just turns to him and says, "No, you get to be here and be gang raped because we need breeders." And it's like, you just ruined the entire point you were trying to make.
And then right after that, you find out that they keep children and old people and sick people hooked up for food, and they drain their blood and stuff. So it's like, wow.
It just completely undermines the entire point.
If Cortman were able to grow a mustache, he would twirl it.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and it's a really good moment when he does have that speech, but then
it just ruins it. It really does. And it just justifies everything that Neville's been doing the entire time.
And then he rants at Neville. Neville doesn't say anything. They cut his feet and let the blood drip down to feed.
Yeah.
And then Christopher, the leader of the clerics, shows up, and I like this character.
It was kind of out of the blue. He just turns to Neville and says, "I used to be your student."
But I did like the idea that he was like this theology student who is now a priest of sorts.
Yeah.
Who he was before has carried over in some sense.
Yeah, I guess.
Now with Cortman, I don't get where we went from semi-normal dude to I'm going to destroy humanity.
Yeah, there wasn't really much of his personality before he became infected anyway.
And they didn't really know each other. They glimpsed each other once.
Yeah, I think he saw him when he went to see Crippen,
Yeah, he sees him
and he
through the
saw him
glass.
in the news and stuff.
Yeah.
But that's it.
So yeah, that's it. And then Christopher keeps talking to him, and Neville's not saying anything, even though Christopher has some fairly interesting things to say, I think,
Yeah, yeah.
about the difference between them and how a lot of us don't agree with Cortman, and
Mm.
we think he's insane. We think he's wasting time on this foolish revenge trip when we could just be building a society.
Which he's actually got a damn good point.
Yes, and I actually like that. I like that there's different opinions within this Hemocyte community.
Yeah.
That there are people who don't like Cortman. They're just too afraid to say anything.
But it really doesn't come to anything, though, does it?
Maybe a little bit when Neville
I
comes back,
guess, but
because Christopher helps him later.
yeah, but it's just first of all you have the big reveal, shocking, and then they completely ruin it, and then the Christopher stuff kind of tries to mend what they already just broke, and it just constantly feels like they don't know what they want to do with these characters, these bad guys, you know?
Well, that's one of my problems. No, even though I do like this script on the whole,
Yeah.
I think it would have been a perfectly fine movie in its own
Mm.
right. I do think it tries way too hard to be an action movie,
Yeah.
and tries way too hard to have action movie villains.
Mm.
So you just have but it still tries to get those ideas in there, so it doesn't really gel the way it should.
Yeah, I think that's the problem is that the book it's not an action book at all.
Well, I mean, there's moments where he kind of kicks ass, but
Yeah, but it's not the traditional action movie
no,
thing, is
it's
it?
a survival thriller, really.
Exactly. So
Give it.
so when they try and like inject moments from the book into the film, it kind of doesn't work because they're still on the action movies kick, you know?
Which I feel like if they would tone that down a little bit
Yeah.
and rearranged a few things, this still would have worked. This would have worked a little.
Yeah, it would have worked. I reckon with another rewrite, it would have worked.
Yes, and there were about 1,000 of them apparently.
Yeah. So maybe too many cooks spoiled the broth.
Yes, that is true. But and then basically happens that you find he gets left alone, and the Hemocytes all go to sleep.
Yeah.
And you find out that Neville, the reason he hasn't been talking all this time is because he stuffed the all-in-one tool in his mouth and kept it there, which props to that guy getting bumped around as much as he did. He must have gotten cut several times.
I mean, I don't really understand that because I always thought of it as like, you know, a Leatherman.
Like a Swiss Army knife?
Yeah.
Well, the
Like-
way
like
it's
what-
described, it sounds like it's just a bunch of points on something.
I guess, but I always thought of it as like a penknife. So it made no sense.
But it was it was described as being kind of triangular and had a bunch of points sticking off of it.
I guess
But
I might have like added the penknife stuff then.
yeah, because it had all these different edges on it.
Yeah.
I looked up all-in-one tools, and all the ones I found were basically just Swiss Army knives.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I think it's something they made up for the movie. I don't know. But so he manages to get himself out of the trap, and he has an encounter with a Hemocyte child, and it's kind of interesting. Oh, the Hemocyte child gets the all-in-one tool, I think.
Oh, yeah.
He drops it, and he manages to get out. And I like that there's a little peaceful moment between the two. That was nice.
Mm.
And so he gets out, goes back to his burned down house.
Yeah.
He retrieves a motorcycle, which it's convenient that's left working, but whatever.
Yeah.
And then he figures out a plan in that he finds a subway train. He goes to like a subway depot, finds the train, somehow figures out how to drive it. It somehow still works. Then he drives it right
Yeah.
into the Hemocyte lair, which is in the middle of like a subway junction. And he goes there to rescue, the food supplies, the children, and
Yeah.
Anna. So yeah, you left her there a whole night to get gang raped some more. Nice going, Neville.
Yeah. It's
And so it turns into
that's definitely the action movie moment. Is like the guy goes away, he suits up, he gets all his equipment, and then he comes back and he, explodes through the door, Kool-Aid Man style. And it's like
Randy Savage style.
yeah. And it's like you said, that's definitely the action movie style, isn't it?
Yeah. And so he bursts in, he gets all of them onto the train, they drive away, and then Cortman, Ava, who's the lead of the Hemocyte warriors, and some of the other warriors, they follow.
Yeah.
And so you get this long thing on the train, and it's established earlier that there was a maintenance tunnel out at the where he left the dog.
Yeah.
And so he sets it up to crash out there, where there's the tugboat that was set up earlier.
Mm.
Convenient.
It really is.
But so there's the whole chase scene. Most of the Hematite warriors are taken out except for Eva and Cortman, and then they end up in the water, and Eva gets killed, and then Cortman summons the blood from her, and then somehow Ethan ends up at the lighthouse.
Yeah, I didn't understand that either.
And so Anna and most of the children get on the tugboat. Neville goes after Ethan, and Cortman follows him. And Neville sends Ethan back to the boat, and then Neville has a fight with Cortman on top of the lighthouse, and which is a storm's brewing, by the way.
It's full on like Sean Connery's death scene in Highlander, isn't it?
Oh yeah. And then Neville, in a move which should have gotten him killed, he runs up the top of the lighthouse and grabs onto the lightning rod.
Yeah.
Breaks it off and then slides down, impaling Cortman, who gets struck by lightning. And
oh yeah, and it actually says "Hand of God" in the script. It's so not subtle.
And then basically he dies, and then Neville, the whole thing with the dogs happens.
Yeah.
And then Neville and the children and Anna, they get on the tugboat and then leave, and he quotes T.S. Eliot, I think, and then says, "I am legend," for no particular reason.
Yeah, because it just doesn't fit at all.
Yeah. Like, I mean, if they hadn't undercut the point earlier, I would be fine with it. But, I mean, I don't really care that you were born in Des Moines, Iowa in 1960.
Yeah, why does he keep pointing that out? Why is that part of his speech?
I guess he's just trying to, ground himself and remind himself who he is. I don't know.
I guess. It just seems a bit weird.
And then there's the bit where the morning sun breaks through the clouds and lights a path to the future.
Yeah. So
yeah, that was the Protosevich script. It's flawed, but I enjoy it as its own piece.
It definitely has potential. And like we said, there are so many moments that are just from the movie.
That it's like we wouldn't have that movie without this. So I'm like, I'm cool with it.
Yeah.
And I would have liked to have seen this this version just kept on being rewritten instead of all the crap they did.
Yeah, because eventually they just went back to this and added bits, didn't they?
Yeah, because there was a whole bunch of rewrites, and then they changed a lot of stuff, but they kept key moments. I would have liked to have seen more of this kept.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a good point. What they kept was good, but there is so much in here that I think would have worked with the Will Smith film as well.
I would have liked to have seen the more human vampires.
Yes, and like we said, more implied social structure with the vampires.
Show a little, but not a lot.
Not a lot. Just imply it more, because
just don't show it right away either, like they did.
Exactly, because it was barely glimpsed in the film.
But you got the idea that they had they would huddle in the corners and they had matings and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And then don't ruin your goddamn point.
And don't reshoot it where he blows himself up.
Oh.
But so yeah, this version, basically with this one, this was the version that Warner Brothers said, okay, we'll do this. They were impressed with this.
Yeah.
And you can see why. This seems like something the executives would like.
Oh yeah, it's got lots of explosions. It's got lots of all the good stuff that they like.
And they looked at a bunch of different actors, and they ultimately went with Arnold because he was still kind of an A-lister in '96.
Yeah, it was kind of like, I think it was at his end of days, wasn't it?
Yeah,
era.
Yeah, it was when he was kind of branching out.
Yeah.
And I can see why Arnold would be attracted to something like this, because he was doing different stuff at that point.
Yeah.
He was doing okay, Junior's not a very good movie, but that's different for him. Oh
yeah, definitely. And he wasn't terrible in it.
No, it's not his fault. It's a movie that should be a comedy, but it's trying to be serious.
Yeah.
And then Jingle All the Way, which, but
honestly, I kind of like it.
It's not terrible. I mean, he does well in it.
Yeah, I mean, as a pointless, brainless holiday comedy, I've seen worse.
Yeah, but it also gave us Jake Lloyd.
Oh God, it was, wasn't it?
Yes.
The horror.
I think that was the movie that George Lucas saw and said, I don't want Haley Joel Osment, I want Jake Lloyd.
The horror.
Son of a bitch. Because Haley Joel Osment would have pulled that off.
He really would.
So Arnold also did End of Days around that time, which I like.
Yeah, it was it's basically, can you shoot the devil in the face?
Which was interesting enough.
Yeah. It's an
And then he
interesting
shoots
concept.
Kevin Pollak in the arm. He's like, "You fucking shot me! Don't be such a pussy." I need to watch that again. I remember liking it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
But yeah, that was a different movie because Arnold was playing like this deep, this dark, troubled character, and Arnold never had done that before.
Yeah, and he was like depressed as shit.
And he did it pretty well.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting role for him, and he was definitely not the worst part of that film.
So yeah, I can see why he was attracted to this, even though the way the script describes Neville, it's not him.
Yeah, and when you think about it, it's kind of like, I mean, didn't he do that like zombie film recently?
Oh, Maggie.
Yeah,
Oh, the Terrence Malick-esque zombie movie.
yeah, it was kind of similar idea there as well, I
Yeah,
think.
the daughter turning into a zombie. I haven't seen it, but
No, me neither.
my understanding is I didn't miss much.
No, it's nothing spectacular from what I've seen
But
either.
it was an interesting experiment for Arnold, I'm guessing.
Yeah, exactly, and it's nice to see actors branch out from what they've been typecast as well.
But I can see why he went with this. I mean, they were also looking at like I said before, like Harrison Ford, Kurt Russell, Mel Gibson.
Yeah.
Mel Gibson, that'd be interesting.
But how would you know?
Fucking hemocytes.
What was that? What was that thing Ricky Gervais said once?
I don't know. I don't pay attention to Ricky Gervais that much.
He said, "I like a drink as much as the next man, unless the next man is Mel Gibson."
That would fit.
Yeah.
Which okay, I'll mention that when we're not recording. But okay, so Ridley Scott signed on to direct, and this was in the '90s before he went completely insane.
I was just gonna say, does it have references to Wayland Yutani and Blade Runner?
So I think when he has a good script, he's great, and I think he might have done something interesting with this.
Yeah, it would have been interesting.
Yeah, it would have been interesting. It's certainly a better script than. Oh, I'm gonna get so much flack for this. It's a better script than The Counselor.
Oh
It's a better.
yeah,
It's a
I can
better.
agree with that.
It's a better script than Exodus. And so yeah, it would have been interesting, I think. And although Prometheus had decent scripts written around it, but he made some poor decisions on that. So
Honestly, I mean, I've actually gone out of my way to read some of the script stuff, and it's really interesting.
but
And
it's a different episode.
oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, but yeah, so I think Ridley Scott could have done well, but eventually he decided that he didn't. He wanted to go in a different direction from the Protosevich script, so he decided to go in something else, and he went with John Logan,
Yeah.
who is he wasn't well known at the time. He hadn't done a movie script yet. He was still a playwright.
Hmm.
His first movie, Bats, hadn't come out yet, which everyone forgets he did that.
That sounds familiar.
It's a movie about killer bats.
Oh.
I've seen it. I don't remember. He
That-
also worked with Ridley Scott on rewriting Gladiator.
Right.
And he's best known now for Skyfall.
Oh, okay. I
Which
did not know that.
Which he did the first pass of that, and it's disputed how much of that he wrote. He claims a lot of his ideas are in there, but Purvis and Wade are like, no, we threw his stuff out.
Right. Okay.
So no one really knows. And he was supposed to be the only writer on Spectre, but apparently his script was so bad they just threw it out.
Wow. And
It was
that's the script they didn't go with.
Yeah, and apparently they used it as the base and just heavily rewrote it.
Because Spectre was not good.
I didn't see Spectre.
You didn't miss much.
I was like, I really want to see it, but I don't want to drive to the theater today.
Yeah.
So yeah, that will lead us into the next script.
Oh yes, the actual Arnold script, isn't it?
Yes, with a lot of our old references in it, but we'll get to that as we go along.
Yeah.
And that leads us into the John Logan draft, which was the one that came the closest to getting made under Ridley Scott in 1997. And it's a pretty interesting script.
Yeah, it's certainly one of the more readable ones as well.
Yes, it is. It just feels like you're reading a movie, and it's probably the most well written of the ones we've read.
Oh yeah, it was really nicely written. It wasn't overly reliant on like, okay, the camera now does this and that. It was all written almost like a story, you know?
Yes, it felt like we were watching a movie while reading it. That's the closest I can come to describing it.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, the way this one is set up is that it begins with a brief prologue where we get to see Robert Neville before the world went to pieces, and you get sort of hints of what's going on.
Yeah.
And it basically, it establishes the idea that his wife is dying, and then it picks up several years later, and he's living in Los Angeles now.
Mm.
and it's basically his conflict with, they're still called hemocytes here, although the reason for that is completely gone.
Yeah, they're just called hemocytes for no real reason.
And they're more animalistic, migratory beings.
Yeah, they're much closer to what they are in the movie in this one.
Although they are a little bit more interesting here, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's really about how, the hemocyte cacique, as he's called, is hunting down Neville, and Neville's going about sort of his daily routine of surviving.
Mm.
And it's all very much an artistic kind of script. Like, this would have been a very ambitious film for 1997.
Yeah, there's a lot of big set pieces designed to show off, all these the big desolation of the city and all this. It really goes a lot into that, which I actually liked. And there's barely any dialogue after the prologue. There's barely any dialogue for a really long time, which is similar to where the movie did it as well, and it worked.
Yes, it actually works really well, and I just found that to be just really interesting to read, just a dialogue-free piece with everything just being described in front of you. And it was really just fascinating to read, and there's like little montages which are described in the form of bullet points.
Yeah, the montages were great.
And it describes the music and how it fades in and fades out and stuff. It specifically brings in Gimme Shelter by the Rolling Stones, which I'm like, okay,
yeah.
That's awesome, although it is kind of owned by Martin Scorsese in terms of movie music.
Right, yeah.
So who knows if that would have worked. And the whole thing really... Also, they picked Life During Wartime by the Talking Heads, which was an interesting song when I went and listened to it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of just purely visual stuff here, which I think Ridley Scott would have done a good job with. Like, the way the shots are kind of described, like moving out into an aerial shot over the desolate city, and how everything is described in terms of montages almost. It would have been interesting to see how Ridley Scott would have done with this.
Yeah, and also it does get a bit too artistic when it gets the not too subtle shot of the two scorpions locked in combat.
No, that was during the opening credits, the way it's described. Yeah, it's basically symbolism for the unending conflict between Neville and the hemocytes.
Yeah, but then they actually literally mirror it at the end as well.
Yes, which that's fine. I mean, I've seen worse.
Yeah, I guess it could have been worse, but it just felt a bit too. This is obviously the metaphor of the film,
Yes, and this one, interesting. Once again, the setting is different. It's Los Angeles, which was really weird to read because my mental picture of Los Angeles is a mixture of LA Noire and GTA 5. So yeah. I'm like, okay, he's living in Trevor's house from not Trevor, Franklin's house in the hills from GTA 5.
Yeah.
And we go down to Wilshire Boulevard, a la LA Noire.
Yeah, it was a weird choice because doesn't it like make up a few buildings as well because it specifically mentions a few.
Well, the buildings it mentions, the ones when he's going along Wilshire Boulevard are real places. Like the Ambassador Hotel was a real place. Now at the time when this was written, it was still there, but it had been closed down for a while, and it's since been demolished.
Oh right.
And they actually held a few Academy Award ceremonies there in the 40s.
Right.
And they've demolished it since, and it's now it's like a public school area, I think. And that's the building where Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated, I discovered.
Oh wow, I did not know that.
So yeah, that's interesting. But the Branson building they specifically point out as being fictional, I think.
Yeah, that's the one I remember, yeah.
You see, because they say it's the tallest building downtown, and I think what happens at John Logan, he didn't know what that building in the middle of the city is called. That's like the only recognizable building landmark in LA.
Right.
The one that the aliens blow up in Independence Day because there's nothing else for them to blow up there.
or it's the one that you like to land on in GTA 5.
Oh yeah, that's true. I hated flying in that game, so I didn't land on anything. So yeah, I think that's it. And that building specifically, it's mentioned in his radio broadcast that he's going to. That's where the rendezvous with other survivors if they hear his broadcast, and he'll check that plaza every 3 days, which makes him sound really not very dedicated to finding other survivors.
Yeah, it did seem a weird choice to have him. Oh yeah, I'll come by. Just let me know.
Yeah,
there's not much dedication there.
It's really just to set up something that happens later,
which wasn't not that great.
Which wasn't one of my favorite things in the script, anyways.
No.
But, so as much as I really liked the script, that thing was just kind of that's there.
Yeah, it just happens and then it's literally forgotten.
Which we'll get to that.
Yeah.
And the next big thing we really have to talk about here is that this one was written after Arnold was signed on, and you can tell they're tailoring it to him because it gets a little funny every now and then.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally that moment where you're reading it and the character turns into Arnold because he's just gunned down a load of hemocytes in a room, and then it says he takes out a cigar and smokes it.
Which that could also be a Ridley Scott thing, because if you ever see video interviews with him, he's always smoking cigars.
Yeah, but they would have Arnold smoking a cigar.
Well, yeah, that's what he does.
Yeah, and then of course there's the other moment which you quite liked.
There's a few. I mean, I've probably forgotten most of. Like, he picks up a deer with like his bare hands every shoot.
Yeah.
And then because he manages to screw up his own Range Rover.
Mm.
And so he's picking out cars from this Hollywood Hills house that he's taken over, and he's just looking at a bunch of them during the montage. It's like a Bentley. Neville, what were you thinking?
Yeah.
That line was pretty funny. And then the last one he pulls the tarp off this big black Hummer, and he just smiles.
Yeah, it's a Hummer, so yeah.
That's an Arnold thing, because he was the first civilian to own a Hummer.
Yeah.
That was pretty funny, and there's just a montage of him tricking it out.
Yeah, that was actually pretty good.
And then there was another bit which reminded me of Arnold, where he literally just punches out a hemocyte with his bare hands.
Yeah, there was a lot of fist fighting, which was different.
Because here they're a lot less superpowered here than they were in the Protosevich one. Like, they don't Hulk out or anything. They're just stronger and bigger than usual humans.
I think it was more implied that they were like they were leaner and more sort of lithe and quick,
and they could
rather
jump
than being strong.
They could jump really high.
Exactly. I think that was the difference.
And what makes them really interesting here is that, to move on to there was another bit where we're getting like a recorded tape of his wife talking, and she mentions when they first met, she told him to play Bruce Willis somewhere else.
Yeah.
But when I read that, I'm like, that's the wrong kind of action hero lady.
Yeah.
So that was pretty funny. But the hemocytes in this are really interesting, because I like how they seem to have a bit of a culture, like they're very animalistic, which is the main thing that kind of carried over into the actual movie, that and a deer hunting scene. They're very animalistic, but they have their own sort of intelligence, like they can communicate with each other.
Yeah, it is shown they have like this non-verbal communication.
And they like can understand their screeches and stuff, and they have like bits of their old life that they wear as like jewelry.
Mm.
And they wrap themselves up in blankets and stuff to hide from the sun. I thought that was like a really visually interesting idea.
Yeah, that was quite clever. How, what is it? They're described as like Bedouin almost, isn't it?
Yes.
And I like that. The whole idea that they kind of just, this whole patchwork of cloth is a really interesting idea, and it would look really interesting too on screen.
And it's really cool how they kind of slowly reveal them.
Yeah.
Over the course of how it's like you get glimpses of them, and basically you get the idea that they have like cat-like eyes, and they have like completely transparent or no skin. It's like the top two layers of skin are missing, and you can like see all the stuff underneath them.
Yeah, it goes into great detail how you can see like the muscles and the sinew.
Which that would have looked amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I would be surprised how they could do that for the time.
Ridley Scott wanted to go the practical route with these creatures.
Yeah, so it could have gone either way, but I mean, Hellraiser did it pretty well, I guess.
Oh yeah, they did it amazingly.
Yeah, so I guess, I mean, it's possible, but for a whole group, I can see why the cloths would be necessary, you know?
Yeah, because they wouldn't be showing it that much, and they mentioned skin is affected by the sun, but not in the burning kind of way. It like changes pigment almost.
Yeah, it specifically says not in the vampire style of burning or something along those lines.
But it's like they're doing something different, but also very interesting with that.
Yeah, because it's like the sun like just mutates them or something.
Yeah, it kills them. It like changes their skin and kills them somehow.
Yeah.
And they also do drink the blood.
Yeah.
So they're still vampires.
Yeah, they do show that.
They just don't have psychic blood summoning powers.
Yeah.
And
fortunately,
the action scenes are all pretty good in this. Like, whenever Arnold is like surrounded by them, it feels like a real struggle.
Yeah,
like, this is very. It's an atypical Arnold movie very much, which is what I liked about this.
Yeah, it does feel like because the problem I kind of thought going into it was that when you hear about all the stuff he's managed to gather, is he going to be a superhero? But I think the action scenes justify all this firepower because it really works. It's really effective, and it shows how dangerous these situations are. So I did like it was kind of, it just showed how they're evenly matched.
Hmm. And so they're both physically strong, and he can fight back. And like there's a bit which is it's kind of reflecting the Protosevich script and the final movie where he falls through the floor and he's hanging from a cable.
Yeah,
And that part reminded me of The Last of Us when you get caught in the snare
yeah, it
and you
did.
have to fight while hanging upside down. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, and how he played dead.
Yes, and the big final sort of action scene with the hemocytes in that small town, spoilers, was pretty badass. Just reading it was just thrilling.
Yeah, that kind of felt like Arnold's Rambo moment.
Oh yeah, because he's in the small town and like he kicks down a wall and brings in the sunlight to kill two of them.
Yeah, exactly.
And then he's like hiding under the water in a sewer and sneaking up behind the cacique.
Yeah, exactly. And you when I was reading it, I think I mentioned this before. It's
Yes.
like you hear him saying, "Come on, I'm here, kill me."
Yes, there are moments.
It's that moment.
And I like how he uses like tricks, like he puts part of his body armor in one place to distract it,
Yeah,
and then gets behind it. And their whole fight scene where they're just clinging to each other, stabbing each other was awesome.
it was. Yeah,
So yeah, the action scenes are good. As far as the character of Neville goes here, I found that I liked him,
yeah. Definitely one of the least irritating versions.
which we actually, believe it or not, we have not gotten to the most irritating
Oh yeah,
version yet. And he's, but he just you buy just the sadness from this character, and it feels like it's an Arnold character, but a more human Arnold character.
yeah. This would have been a really interesting role for him, definitely.
It would, because he was, like I said before, he was experimenting around in the 90s, and
Mm.
it was actually attached to the Oliver Stone Planet of the Apes movie that never happened.
Yeah.
Which that's what drugs were you on when you wrote that? But yeah, that's later on down the line. So yeah, I actually really liked him in this because he has like kind of a sense of humor, and it seems like he isn't just completely depressed.
Yeah, that's true. He does. He has fun with being able to do anything he wants.
Yes, like he drives down the hill in his car and just honks his horn.
Yeah, he times himself and he races.
And he gets
That
really
was
happy
fun.
because he gets really happy because he beats his own. One thing which was fun but kind of weird was when he shoots the Barney.
Oh yeah, he shoots a stuffed Barney doll for no real reason.
Yeah, he shoots a stuffed Barney doll and then knocks off a hatch mark on the roof of his car. So it's like he's counting down all the Barneys in the city. I'm like, man, John Logan, you really hate Barney.
Yeah, and he does seem to hate Barney because after he's done that, Neville is humming the tune, and it specifically says, I can't remember what it's specific, something like incessantly irritating or something.
Yeah,
like
pretty much that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he must really hate Barney.
And I like how he moves through, how he seems to be very methodical in the way he's scavenging, and how he has like different marks he leaves on different buildings.
Yeah.
And he has like his big old map that he's marking things down on.
Well, what was kind of interesting as well, I mean, this is a weird thing for me to really like, but I like the fact that it specifically says he has a map and a piece of plastic over the map to mark on.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I just really like that little detail.
It means he doesn't want to screw up his actual map. He wants the actual.
Exactly.
He wants it to be readable if he needs it.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that was really clever, and I don't know why I picked up on it. I just really like that.
Yeah, and one thing I liked about this is that his house and his setup, it's more high tech than the book, but it doesn't feel as high tech as the last one.
Oh yeah, definitely not.
Because it's explained in ways that actually feel real. Like his medical center is just a bedroom with a shelf of medical books and a little fridge he keeps all his important stuff in.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a guy who has found this stuff. It feels like a guy who just had a lot of time on his hands.
Yes, and his garage is just a garage. It's not this underground
Yeah.
super thing. And his study is just, books and charts and stuff piled up. It's not like a huge library. And I found that very interesting. And another thing I find interesting about him as a character here is that he's not in his original house here.
Mm.
He's in another house he moved into. It seems to be saying something very different about the character than other versions have, where in the other...
a bit more nomadic is the word I came up with.
Yes, in the other versions he was very much attached to his house, and here it's almost like he wants to leave those memories behind in a sense.
Yeah, he does. And I think that kind of reflects in the ending as well with the picture.
Yes, it does, because he carries his memories with him, basically.
Yeah.
And another thing I like about here that it kind of reflects something from the Protosevich draft, which is different. is that he was keeping all these videotapes and stuff and all these recordings as like a historical record. He does that here, but he keeps the audio tapes that his wife recorded before she died, so it feels like a much more human character moment here.
Yeah.
And when, spoilers, the cacique burns his house down and he can't get the tapes out in time, that's a much more devastating moment than the house getting burned down than the Protosevich script was.
Yeah, and I thought that was really well written as well, because it did feel like a huge deal.
Yes, and I really did like the tape recordings of his wife here, because without actually seeing her all that much, you get a real sense of what kind of person she was.
Yeah, and plus it does the flashback thing without actually doing the flashback, because it really doesn't flashback at all, really. And I think that it was a good change, because it just made a difference.
Yeah, it was just a really interesting way to sort of get into the character's head in a way, without ever actually really meeting her, aside from that brief bit in the prologue. And she's the one who brings in the I Am Legend thing here.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And it's similar to the book, where because humanity is gone, Neville is the legend now, and it tying in with some things you learn from the Hemocytes as well. It kind of gets those ideas across in a different way.
Yeah.
And it also does the whole spiritual you were chosen thing in a much less ham-handed way than the final movie does.
Yeah, it does. It does it all very naturally, and how an actual person would think about the situation, and not how a Hollywood writer would. It works a lot better, in my opinion.
Yeah, the philosophizing made sense, because this is a woman who's on her last leg. She has to find something to believe in.
Exactly, it worked so much better.
And I have to say, the setup in this script, that 13-page prologue, is a thing of just absolute beauty.
It is, because it's so subtle.
It gives you everything you need to know about the world as it goes to hell.
Yeah.
Without ever actually without ever needing a flashback later on. You just get hints and stuff like the work site where he's an architect at. Yes, Neville is an architect here.
Yeah.
It's undermanned, and they don't have enough people to do the job properly. And you get bits and news flashes, and then you see the hospital where the wife is at, and everything's in chaos and stuff.
Yeah, and I really like the creepy guy at the gas station.
Yeah, the creepy guy at the gas station was amazing, because
it's just that sentence of, it mentions raindrops falling over his eyes and he doesn't even blink.
Yes, it's foreshadowing the Hemocytes there.
Yeah, it's a really creepy moment, written really well, in my opinion.
Yes, and I like how it's meant, like, even Neville can tell there's something wrong with him, but he can't quite tell what it is, except he's unusually pale.
Yeah.
And then when he comes back from the bathroom, the guy is just gone.
Yeah, the whole place is just completely abandoned.
That was cool. That was great.
Yeah.
And just the stuff where he takes the wife home. Like, okay, I don't buy that the National Guard would just let him take the wife out of the hospital.
No.
But it worked fine for what they were doing.
I did like the fact that it was the doctor the doctor says, what the hell are you doing? And he says, I'm going to take her home. And the doctor just says, maybe that's for the best. And that line is like, that's quite the punch in the gut.
Yeah.
When you think about it.
Yeah, I actually did think that was a great line. And then the stuff with them at home, the brief glimpses you get, and him sort of just washing the dishes, and then that way it transitions into the opening credits and signaling the end is that the TV just goes off.
Yeah.
The TV broadcast goes off, which is not something that happens in a world where you have cable.
Yeah.
I just thought that was a great way to just sort of transition that. Now, one thing about this script that I don't like is that it has an obsession with animals.
Yeah.
And there's so many birds in this script. It's like John Logan read the bit in the Protosevich draft where it's mentioned that birds mainly just die from the virus.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else there. And so there's very few birds left. It's almost like he went, I'm going to do the exact opposite of that, and just filled like every other page full of birds.
Yeah, and there are moments where it just feels like, did Alfred Hitchcock write this? What the hell's going on?
Or did John Woo write this?
Yeah, because, I mean, there is a scene where I think it's like a shit ton of starlings just attack his building.
Yeah, and because you find out they're being controlled by the Hemocyte cacique.
Yes, somehow.
Which was interesting.
That's a thing. It was an interesting change, definitely.
Yeah, it was interesting. And then they just literally attack him and swarm him at the end.
Yeah.
And and it actually was an interesting payoff, because he's seeing starlings throughout the script, and then you get that reveal of it of it sort of making the musical call and directing the starlings. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, the whole fact that they were like almost like homing beacons for the hemocytes in a way.
Yes, and the relationship between Neville and the hemocytes is fairly interesting here because you get the idea that they're migratory and they're not always there. So when they're not hunting Neville, I guess that means they literally are looking for a place to go. Sorry. But yeah, I like how they come into town, and I like how they stay in like a big abandoned soundstage.
Yeah,
That was an incredible visual.
it really was.
And I find it interesting that it's almost like if it wasn't for him, they would have moved on.
Yeah, it does seem like it's because he was the leader.
Yes, the Cacique specifically wanted to get rid of Neville because you find out that they do view Neville as the legendary monster who attacks them during the day.
Yeah.
And because what happens is that Neville ends up knocking out a hemocyte and taking it home, which it's kind of weird. There's not really a good explanation for why he does this.
It's something about because he sees the locket. There's a locket around this one's neck, and
It makes him curious.
yeah,
He sees the picture inside the locket, and that makes him curious. But I don't buy that he would take it home with him right then and there.
especially when he didn't actually have a place to keep it properly.
Yeah, he just had He ends up putting it in a racquetball court that he like puts bolts on and stuff.
Yeah. Although, is it before that where the hemocytes attack his place for the first time?
They don't attack his place until, well, before that they attack his safe house.
Yeah, that's the one I mean, because that moment I found was incredibly creepy, because he gets back after dark, and then a huge horde, similar to the previous script where they stay outside his building and they just chant and do drumming.
Well, they didn't know he was there.
No, they were just looking for him. But the creepy moment I found that really, really did freak me out in a bit was it mentions how the drumming and the chanting just stops, and then all of them aren't facing him. And it mentions that the Kashyyyk guy is just moving his head back and forth.
Yes.
In a creepy way. And that just, I don't know why, but that visual freaked me out.
Yeah, the behavioral stuff is really creepy the way it's described. Now, I have a problem with the safe house stuff because A, it basically makes him into Batman.
Yeah.
This auxiliary bases and stuff. And B, he would not have been found if he just stayed in the room and just peeked out from behind the curtains instead of going up onto the roof of his cigar.
Yeah, because that's how they find him. They can smell the cigar that's still lit.
Even though he stepped on it, I don't get that.
Yeah, it's like the tiniest ember, and they can sense it.
Which that tells you how strong they are.
Yeah.
But so he takes this hemocyte back, he locks it up in the racquetball court, and he starts getting ideas, and he decides to maybe he has blood of his own that he keeps in the fridge in case of transfusions, which makes sense he has that. And so he just gets the idea to feed it and see what happens.
Yeah.
And his blood, for whatever reason, makes it turn back human.
That was a weird choice.
To some extent. It's interesting.
I mean, it does say as well that she doesn't turn completely human.
It just sort of partway changes her back. It reawakens her mental state.
Which I did like. I wouldn't have liked it if it was just like, oh, his blood is the cure for some random reason. No, it's actually it just kickstarts a few things to make them a bit more human.
Yes, and I like how it establishes very firmly that this is not a permanent cure. If she doesn't keep feeding on his blood, she will turn back, and he has no way of making enough of that blood. And I like how there's no real explanation for why his blood is immune. Like, they kind of give you the idea that maybe it's this and maybe it's that, but there's no real explanation, just like there's no real explanation of where the infection came from in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. I did like the ambiguity of it, and it allowed your imagination to think of other things.
Yes, and so she slowly comes back, and she remembers her name was Emma, and they have this really, and it is a woman.
Yeah.
And they have this really interesting sort of philosophical debate, where she's talking about how this is not a world for you anymore, this is a world for us, and how you get this interesting insight into the hemocyte mindset, where they're like, our way is actually better,
yeah.
we feel. And I thought that was really fascinating, and how she mentions, oh, you come and kill us while we were asleep, and he says, hey, if I'm a hunter, it's because you made me.
Yeah, it was an interesting scene because it gave an incredibly valid argument for both sides. And it didn't really take sides very much.
And it didn't completely undercut the point immediately after.
Yeah, exactly.
Which it still kind of undercuts it later, but not nearly as drastically. But yeah, so they have this interesting sort of interaction. I like how they don't play them off as love interests.
Yeah, I did like that.
They just sort of find a sort of human affection for each other.
Yeah, it's much more of a respect and wanting to learn.
Yes, and
than anything else.
And I liked, the moment where he reintroduces her to sunlight for the first time. Man, that was amazing.
It was.
And then she decides she actually does want to remember her family, which was great. And then
because that's because of the locket, because that's what he saw when he opened the locket.
Yeah, it's a picture of her and her family in the locket, and so he shows it to her. And at first she doesn't remember them, and then she kind of does, and then she's like, I don't want to remember for good reason.
Yeah.
But then she eventually changes her mind. And that whole character I love.
Yeah, it was great. And it was a nice change from having the spy character.
Yes. And I liked how it was like they took her from Ruth. They did like a version of Ruth from the book, only they combined the whole New Society thing with the Hemocytes themselves.
Yeah, it actually worked quite well.
Yeah, it works better here than it does in the Protosevich version.
Oh, yeah.
But the reason why I like that is because it adds a whole new dimension to the conflict. It's not like, oh, Neville's killing vampires when there's this other group he was also killing that we find out about. It makes them one and the same.
Yeah.
Which adds a different dimension to it, which I like.
Yeah, because I always felt that in the second script, I think it was the second script. No, the first script, sorry. Where he's killing the dead ones that are mindless, where he's also killing the alive ones who aren't mindless. So it was kind of a cop-out way of giving Neville still of a good guy status, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas here, there's no way about it. He's killing these people who have a society, they have a mind, and it doesn't back out of that quandary. It goes into that, and it really does delve into it really well.
And the whole dynamic between those two is really damn interesting.
Yeah.
And then it more or less comes to a head when he notices he notices fire outside his window, and it's coming from around the Branson building.
Yeah.
And he also notices vultures, and so he goes out there and he says, "Okay, I'm not going to lock you up. You can have the run of the house." And oh, by the way, I like the bit where they're at the dinner table, and she said, "I could jump across this table and kill you any second if I wanted to."
Yeah, and that kind of just shows that she's still not human.
And as far as Emma went, as far as casting her goes, I don't know for 97, but for whatever reason, my mind went to Gwendolyn Christie when I was reading it.
Right. Okay.
Because they're supposed to be tall and strong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it would be a more substantial role for her than Captain Phasma.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, so he goes down into town, and it's sort of intercut with her listening to the wife's tapes and having an emotional reaction to it, which is really good. And he finds out in front in the Branson Plaza where he was supposed to meet, he finds the dead bodies of survivors that got ambushed and then slaughtered and just left for him to find. And it doesn't really work.
Yeah,
it feels really random, like they needed something to get him away from the house.
It does feel really random, because even it would have been better if there was like a hint of these people who were going to show up. But they show up to die and be a distraction, and then they just disappear.
Yeah, you don't know what it is. It would have been better if they just left a false signal and he was trying to figure out what it was.
Yeah.
And then they ambushed him down there or something. Yeah. It was a little too weird, because as we find out throughout this thing, the Cacique has been using the birds to find Neville's house up in the hills. And so he spends, I don't know why it takes him all day to bury these damn guys, but
I don't know why he would bother either.
Because they're the last humans, I don't know. But he digs graves and then buries them. I don't know why it takes all day. Yeah. But he doesn't get back to his house until night, and he finds that the house has been set on fire, and he tries to, get the tapes, but he can't. And then he finds that Emma has basically been crucified on a telephone pole across. Why he didn't see that when he pulled up to the house, I don't know.
Oh yeah, that was weird.
And then apparently you got this interesting thing where apparently the Cacique thinks she has been infected by Neville.
I thought that was a really clever way of doing that, actually.
Yes, that is clever, because it shows that Neville and the Cacique and their mindsets aren't so different from one another.
Yeah, exactly.
and that they have. I just wish the Cacique had a little bit more character to him now that I think of it, because it could have been really interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they would do it without ruining it, though.
Yeah, like, I don't know, maybe make him Ben Cortman in some fashion,
Possibly.
and that would make the fight at the end more personal.
I guess, yeah. So possibly something like from the past, I guess. Maybe the Doctor.
The Doctor, yes, that would be interesting.
That would
And,
have been
and that's
interesting.
why
Yeah.
that's why it thinks in terms of infection.
Yeah. That would have been really interesting.
But no, at the end, he finds the guy's wallet, and it's just some dude.
Yeah, I honestly thought they were going to pull the whole thing of like, oh, he was actually Emma's husband.
That would have been really interesting, because you actually see Emma and him interacting when they hunt the wild horses.
Yeah.
Because she's the hemocyte that he like pimp slaps away from the horse while he's feeding on it.
Yeah, yeah. And there is like supposed to be like this whole mate thing.
Yes, that is all. I would have liked to have seen hemocyte children here too.
Yeah, but they wouldn't have done that.
There wouldn't have been any way to do it really in this story.
No.
But okay, so she dies, and it is actually really sad.
Yeah.
And Neville drives off into the desert, and there's a really funny bit where he sees a coyote and he tells it to fuck off, and it does. And
Yeah.
the hemocytes are following him, and they're actually dying in the sunlight because the Cacique is this obsessed.
Yeah, and that, I mean, going back to what you said before about how the fight in the abandoned town.
Yes.
What I thought was really great about that is that it wasn't so much the hemocytes doing it, it was this Cacique.
Who is like sending them in.
Yeah, because I mean, you made the argument that it didn't make much sense that they would continue to do this, but I think it was specifically the Cacique doing it.
Yes, that's what I was thinking too. What I meant by that was they keep following him. They wouldn't follow him if it wasn't for the Cacique.
Exactly, and I did like the fact that it was almost like he was obsessed as Neville was, but Neville was leaving.
Yes.
You know?
And so you get the whole, and there's a bit where they burrow into the sand, which was a really cool part.
Oh yeah, to avoid the sun. That was clever.
Yes, and then they fight, and then you get the huge fight in the town at the end, which is just, it is the come on, kill me, I'm here.
Yeah.
Which it is so cool, because it's like he's shooting them. He loses a gun. He runs into the abandoned market, and he kicks down the back wall and brings in all the sunlight and kills them. It's made out of tin, so it's not hard to kick down.
Yeah.
And then, he fights the Cacique, and they end up in the sewer. He hides in the sewer, sneaks up behind it, shoves a flare in its face.
Yeah, that was all. It was a really, really well done ending climax.
Yeah, and then they end up in the bowling alley fighting in there. He whacks it, and he breaks its ankle with a bowling ball, which is amazing.
I just like this idea of Arnold rolling a ball against the monster and just knocking it down like pins. And
Yes.
even having that pin falling sound effect.
Yes. And, I've been a bowler intermittently, so I'm just like, yeah, because those bowling balls are heavy.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, that's cool, and then it just ends with them, like, in a death grip with each other. He's, like, stabbing it in the gut.
And again, mirroring the Scorpion from the beginning.
The symbolism's fine by me, but...
Yeah.
And then, so he wanders off, he grabs his wife's picture, which he keeps in his car with him. And he's looking at it, and he's wondering, what do I do now? And he sees a glint of light through the market. He walks through, he's at an Air Force base.
Yeah.
He keeps walking, he finds a space shuttle covered in graffiti, and there's a boy there who asks him his name. And that's the ending, except a little bit earlier you find out there's still one hemocyte alive, and it's going to keep going after him. This war goes on. So, even though it kind of plays as something of a happy ending, my theory is that the hemocyte follows him and kills both of them.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it was still daytime.
But yeah, they were fighting in the daytime just fine.
Yeah, I guess. I guess I'm very, very reluctant to go with that really horrible ending.
Well, it seems like that might be what happens, but it leaves it open. It's an alright ending.
Yeah, it's an alright ending. It is a bit too quick, in my opinion.
It is a little too quick, but it probably would have played out less quick when it was filmed.
Yeah,
Like
and at least it wasn't the ridiculously bad ending of the original version of the film.
Yeah, it wasn't he just randomly blows himself up.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, there's survivors in Vermont, so God was talking to us all along, or whatever.
Jesus.
But yeah, it is an interesting ending. In this script, there was a lot of concept art done for it. I showed you some.
Oh, yeah.
And it looked really good.
Yeah, it did.
And they were going to go ahead with it, but what happened with this version is that basically Warner Brothers went through a long string of flops in like 97, 98. The biggest of which was probably Batman and Robin.
Oh, yeah.
So they were under pressure to keep their budgets tight, and they weren't sure they wanted to put that kind of budget into a movie which was really kind of bleak with no dialogue and had kind of an odd open ending like that, which didn't have much merchandising potential. Which, considering the situation Warner Brothers was in at the time, I can't really blame them.
Yeah, it's true that it's definitely a script that would be a risk in many different ways.
Yes.
You know, for the actors, for the writers, the director, everyone was at risk with that. So it had to be done at the right time, and I think it was just the wrong time, wrong place, you know?
Yes, yeah, that was it. That's basically what ultimately killed it, according to Ridley Scott, was that he got the budget down to about 105 million. They wanted like 90, and he said, and he couldn't get it any lower, so that's what ultimately killed it.
Right.
Which Ridley Scott, it was interesting reading an interview where Ridley Scott was actually coherent, because he rarely is these days.
Yeah.
And he was like saying, like, you can't do a film of this scope set in an abandoned major city for less than a certain amount of money. And he's actually kind of right.
Yeah, it's true.
Now, you can do a smaller scope version of this story, but the version Warner Brothers clearly wanted would have been bigger.
Yeah. So it was kind of a catch-22 of wanting it big but not wanting to pay for it.
Yeah, and on top of all that, Arnold and Ridley Scott were both in, like, dry spells in their careers, because Arnold had a string of just underperformers, starting with Last Action Hero.
Which is weird, because that's a good film.
Yeah, that is a pretty interesting film. But his movies just weren't doing that well. Like, he had, like, it was like that, Eraser. I don't know if True Lies was a hit or not, but I like True Lies.
Yeah.
And Batman and Robin was a huge, colossal failure.
Rightfully so.
Yes, rightfully so. And Ridley Scott as well had been like he started off well with Thelma and Louise, and then he did like a Christopher Columbus movie that didn't do anything. He did a movie about Jeff Bridges on a boat, which I haven't seen.
I'm not familiar with that.
I think it's called White Squall.
Right. No, I don't know that one.
And the one he had done most recently before this was G.I. Jane, which...
Wow.
I remember that movie being really hyped up when it came out, and I remember watching some of it and being like, this doesn't live up to that.
Wow, yeah. That is amazing, actually, how, you know, someone like Ridley Scott, you know, even the name has impact, can make quite a lot of crap.
Yeah, he's like George Romero in that respect.
Oh, yes.
We keep coming back to him in this.
Yes. It's almost like you're tormenting me.
Well, I was tormenting you with the Land of the Dead references, but...
Yeah.
But so, yeah, there's that. So this version kind of, like, okay, the John Logan version, they shifted that out, and then Protosevich started working with Ridley Scott again, and then there was... I'm a little confused as to the timeline of some of these things, because it is ridiculously complicated. And then Ridley Scott walked away. Arnold was still technically attached. It went to Rob Bowman, who had just had a pretty decent hit with the X-Files movie.
Right, yeah.
And so it was supposed to be like a down and dirty version, and Arnold was attached at one point, and supposedly Bowman wanted Nick Cage, which this was still bringing out the Dead era Nick Cage, so that would have been really good.
Yeah, it would have been.
And then that fell apart, and Protosevich was working on that. And there was a version by a writer called Neil Jimenez, which I haven't been able to find any information about that other than that it was esoteric.
Yeah, and he is credited on this last one as well, isn't he?
Yes, he is, but I don't know what from his version they took, so...
It's Philip.
Oh, I hope not. But he had some critical... I looked at his IMDb and stuff. He had a decent amount of critical acclaim in the late 80s and early 90s.
Really? What, like?
It just, he did like some indie movies and stuff.
Oh, okay.
And then he did this movie called Hideaway with Jeff Goldblum, and that apparently did poorly and killed his career.
Wow, that's a shame.
I mean, it's Jeff Goldblum. So yeah, I don't know what the deal is with that version. And then the project came back in like 2002, 2003, because Will Smith showed interest in it, and Arnold had moved on to being a producer. And he got together with Protosevich, and they worked on the version in 2003. And Michael Bay was slated to direct. And that version is supposedly 70% of what we see on screen in the final movie.
Which is quite surprising, actually.
And apparently, according to Protosevich, his third act was different in that when Anna shows up, she's alone, and her brother has been taken by the hemocytes, and she thinks he's dead. But then she sort of forms a tenuous relationship with Neville. But then the alpha male shows up and proves to her that the brother is still alive, thinking that if she goes to get him, Neville will follow and it will be a trap. And then Neville finds in their lair that they are forming families, and so he sort of realizes his mistake.
Yeah.
And pulls out, which sounds like a much more interesting ending than either of the versions we had.
Yeah, so as long as they don't end that scene with the alpha hemocyte then saying, we're going to gang rape you.
They're going to gang rape Will Smith.
That would be interesting.
That would be a different role for
choice.
him. It's outside his usual range, and he likes to do that.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, that version fell apart because they decided, because 28 Days Later came out and they decided it was too soon to do something similar to that.
Yeah.
And that was also in the middle of Michael Bay's big I want to be taken seriously phase.
Not a long-lasting phase.
Because he's trying again, but he did Pearl Harbor, and he also did the Island at that time, which is one of his better movies, frankly, but...
Oh, yeah, that's true.
But he, who knows how he would have done with this? Maybe if he just followed the script and didn't do too many of his Bayisms. There probably weren't too many helicopters in that draft.
Yeah, but there probably would have been quite a few helicopters at sunset.
The whole movie would have been set at sunset, but that would fit.
Yeah. It would actually have a reason to have his sunset trope.
So yeah, it fell apart from there, and then what happened is that Warner Brothers considered it the broken toy that nobody really wanted to play with. They considered it basically a project they had that couldn't get made, and so Akiva Goldsman had formed his production company.
Yeah.
And he looked at a bunch of projects that Warner Brothers had, and he said, okay, I want that. I'll do that. And so he started working on scripts. And we get to this next version, which Akiva actually pitched this idea to Mark Protosevich, and Protosevich said, no, that misses the entire point, and then he got let go.
Which I can agree with Protosevich on this one.
Yes, and this script, wow. Now, my thoughts on this one aren't going to be super detailed, because I've been planning this episode for months, so I've been reading and rereading these scripts and taking notes and stuff. This one I found literally 2 days before we started recording.
Oh, wow.
And it was I knew it existed because I had read the interview with Protosevich, but I didn't know it was out there, and then someone posted it to the forum I'm on. And so I downloaded it, and I was like, well, do you want to do it? And he went, sure, send it to me. So I did, and this was awful.
It really was.
This was
surprisingly bad considering where it came from.
Yes, and where did it come from?
As in the previous ones haven't been that bad.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, this one is, they've all been good to some degree before now.
Yeah, well, they've all had at least really good moments.
Really interesting stuff. This is just bland. Should I do the summary on this one? Yeah,
you do the summary because I can see you're itching to do that.
Yes, the summary on this one is there's been a plague, and Manhattan has been quarantined, as well as a bunch of other cities around the world. But most of the world is fine, and Robert Neville, who was a military scientist, has stayed behind in Manhattan because his infected wife and daughter are there, and he wants to find a cure. And he's alone for about 30 pages, and he runs into this guy called Philip, and then the plot moves forward. And it's all about him trying to cure the disease and save his family.
Yeah, and what really pissed me off is that he's not alone almost barely anything in the script. He's alone for, like you said, a few pages, but then Philip shows up and it completely changes the entire atmosphere of the whole thing.
Yes, and even when he's alone, he won't stop talking.
Yeah, he just wouldn't shut the fuck up.
Yeah, he just keeps saying stupid line after stupid line, and it's like, oh god, I couldn't stomach him after a while. I'm like, dog, leave him, because this guy has a lost cause.
Yeah, he's like making jokes to the dog. He's asking the dog questions, expecting a response.
He's even talking to the hemocytes, which are still called that in this for no reason.
Yeah,
and that word actually doesn't come up until like 20 pages from the end.
Yeah.
And oh man, and there's this whole thing about how the plot hinges on him needing like a special centrifuge for his experiments, but it's too heavy for one man to carry.
Which is weird, because surely someone with unlimited amount of time and resources, which he has, he has literally the entire city, surely he could get like something to help him.
Read your Archimedes, find leverage, damn it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Just something like one of those things they use to carry heavy barrels and stuff.
yeah, like something like that, like a get pulleys, man.
Yeah, there are ways to get around it.
Yeah, but no, he needs another person. And he's reading and he's like experimenting and finding out that maybe this disease is moving on to phase 2. No, it's on phase 2, it's moving on to phase 3. And so he's wandering around, and there's a bit where he captures a hemocyte to experiment on it, and while he's strapping it down to the table, he just won't shut up.
Yeah, he just keeps talking to the damn thing.
Really, the only redeemable part of this was the dog, because the dog was cool.
Yeah, the dog actually was a really good. I was going to say plot device, but that's definitely the wrong word.
No, it's just, it's a foil.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the word. Yes.
And so that was cool. And I liked some of the science fiction ideas in this, like which would have been better in something else, like the weird probes that come down if they detect like human presence.
That was weird because it felt weirdly pseudo futuristic.
Yeah, it felt like it turned into Oblivion with Tom Cruise for a few minutes.
Yeah, and it mentions how because this plague has been such a problem for such a long time, even Amazon, their trucks are now completely unmanned. And it's like, why would you bother?
Yeah.
It's just such a weird thing to do.
I mean, it was interesting, but it would have been better in a different script.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I did like the idea of the survivor phones, which can scan your DNA for the infection.
Yeah, that was interesting, if a bit unnecessary.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And there's one, because he's monitoring the building where his infected wife and daughter are hiding out, and he's watching them over the security footage.
Yeah.
And you get this scene where it's like, because I was picturing Will Smith and a black actress playing the wife.
Yeah.
It just turned into a complete Tyler Perry drama scene to me, because she's now in like an abusive relationship with the non-audience friendly man.
Oh, yeah.
Who's like pimp slapping the shit out of her and the kid.
Yeah, and he's still constantly talking as well.
Yeah, I'm like,
while it's happening.
That's just like, this is just really distasteful, this part.
It really is. Because it's like, it doesn't really add anything, just establishing that that's his wife and daughter, which they don't even establish it at the time anyway.
Yes. It came off to me that he was more mad that she was with another man than that she was infected.
Yeah, that was it. It was the fact that she was with another man, and not the fact that she was infected, and not even the fact that she was being beaten by him.
And then, okay, he spends a while wandering around, and then he runs into Philip. And I have to mention the way he runs into him is a really ham-handed homage to the Omega Man. Because the way the love interest is first introduced in that, she's posing and like pretending to be a mannequin.
Oh, yeah.
And then she runs away and he thinks it's a hallucination at first.
That's right, yeah.
But yeah,
I wondered about that because I haven't seen that in, a long time.
Yeah, that's a part of that. That was an odd scene in that movie too.
Yeah.
But okay. Since I handle just how stupid the premise is, you handle Philip.
Oh God, where do you start?
He's a hipster douchebag.
He really is, and his story is basically like he was a cook who hid out in this place they call the village.
Well, it was a village in Greenwich Village, I think they said, or something like that.
Yeah, and it was a bit too weird the way that was all mentioned anyway. But he's basically been hiding out in a big vault full of electricity and food and water and all this stuff. So that's why he's a survivor. But even Neville says that doesn't make sense. You've been out here for 3 days and you're perfectly fine. But he completely forgets about any suspicion soon after anyway.
And he's just annoying every time he speaks because he's really good at cooking. It got to a point with all this odd couple crap they're doing with them. I'm like, are they going to end up a thing?
Yeah, I did think that because he makes him a candlelit dinner.
Yeah, and he fought somehow, and this bothered me. I don't know why I'm nitpicking this, but he found wine in Neville's food stocks that Neville didn't know was there. You'd think Neville would have like a catalog of everything he has.
Yeah, does he just take shit and not even check what it is?
Yeah, and then, okay, if you hated the scene in the movie where Will Smith sings "I Shot the Sheriff," there's a scene in this where they're sitting on the couch together singing a Motown song, and I swear this bullshit goes on for like 2.5 pages.
It does. I skimmed it after a while because I was like, this won't stop.
Yeah, it was so just awful. And then he starts getting really whiny and annoying because he finds out that Neville knows things about the disease. How do you know this? And he just starts acting like a hippie asshole.
Yeah.
And he just eventually Neville reveals, and this is kind of dickish, that everybody apparently was working on they were working on like viral weapons and stuff, and that it somehow just evolved and got out.
Yeah, so all I thought was, oh, okay, so you're just as crap as Umbrella.
Yes. And apparently they don't even know who was responsible because everybody's doing it.
Yeah, don't they have any kind of records?
And then Philip is like, I'm just gonna leave because because even though this guy saved my life, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I do kind of like how they play around with maybe Neville's insane, but they do way too much with that.
Yeah, and it doesn't really amount to anything, and it wasn't really mentioned beforehand. So it's just there.
And so Philip, he sets up the extraction with one of those survivor phones.
Yeah.
He sets it up for Philip, and so he does it, and it's going to be a day, and so he has him help him get that centrifuge out of the hospital. And apparently there's this weird thing with Neville's watch screwing up.
Yeah, I mean, I interpreted that was that
sabotage, because we find out later Philip is a saboteur.
Yeah.
But no, they get back, they plug it in, and then it turns out that Philip is stage 3, and that they can now pass as human, except for really, really high strobes.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, Neville in this carries around the freaking strobe stick.
Oh, yeah. What does he call it?
A candy stick.
Yeah, that was like, what the hell? Why are you calling it that?
I didn't even know what it was for most of it.
No.
Because he kept calling it a candy stick. And then Philip does the whole, he's like, we are monsters, but you are legend. This was stupid speech.
It was so ham-handed.
It was so stupid. Then the dog attacks him and bites him, and his skin's so hard the teeth break off. Which, that was just funny. that was just, I'm sorry, it's awful for the dog, but that was just hilarious.
All I can imagine is this dog just gummy, just going nah, nah, nah.
And then Neville, who made the cure, then okay, I thought at first that when he injected Philip in the eye that the cure just was too strong and it killed him. But no, it's revealed like a few minutes later that he died because Neville stabbed him so hard the needle went through the eye and into his brain.
So he just wasted the cure, basically.
No, but he can make more.
I guess, but it was like, that was, yeah, it still was a bit crap.
No, so he makes more. He makes the dog some silver teeth, which you're an idiot, Neville, because silver is a really soft metal.
Yeah.
So that's not going to do the dog any good, which I think that was a ham-handed silver vampire reference.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And then, so he makes more of the cure, and then he goes to get his wife and kid. He's going to take them to the extraction point they set up for Philip.
Yeah.
And then so he goes, he gets them, and he's in the middle of curing them, and his daughter starts attacking him.
Oh, yeah, and his daughter becomes, like, really demonic.
She starts giving off, like, Chucky-style one-liners.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is she? Is she the little girl from In the Mouth of Madness now?
Or the little girl from 30 Days of Night.
Yeah, and then her skin is too hard because she's stage 3.
Yeah.
And so he stabs himself, and then she bites him and drinks his blood, and that cures her.
Magically.
Yeah, and so his wife and daughter, they're fine.
Which is such Hollywood bollocks, let's be honest.
Yeah, it is bollocks. And so he gets them, they're going, and the helicopter lands, and it turns out that the hemocytes are all going to swarm the Brooklyn Bridge and destroy the halogen lights. And so he decides he's going to...
Well, before we get to that, sorry, but before we get to that, one of the things that I found really weird about this helicopter is that when they called the helicopter, they point out several times, okay, you have one survivor, there's one survivor, yes, one survivor, and then it just doesn't even matter.
Yes, that was a bit of a plot hole.
It was ridiculous.
Yes, yeah, that was weird, but okay, so they're on the helicopter, and then there's another helicopter, which the hemocytes somehow managed to make it crash?
Well, it sounds like they did a kind of World War Z thing where they just piled on top of each other.
Yes. Well, okay, whatever. They're swarming the bridge. They're going to get over. Oh, no. And so Neville orders an airstrike on the bridge behind him, and he's holding them off with it's really stupid to read him holding them off with a strobe stick.
It really is.
And his wife, they kiss and then she just disappears, and I assume she's dead.
Yeah, she literally disappears. Because I remember the exact line, because I read it several times, because I was so confused. They say something like inspirational to each other. He leans in for a kiss, and then that's it. She just literally, but yeah, she just disappears, and there is no mention of what happened, where she went, or anything. It's so weird.
And then he quickly writes a little note on his daughter's back and then sends her and the dog running as fast as they can to the other side. And so he's standing there holding them off with that dumbass stick thing.
Yeah.
And they end up swarming him, and then the girl manages to get across as the airstrike comes in, and then saves the rest of the world. And then so she's at the decontamination center, and they see on her back the note saying the cure is inside me, and then the dog like smiles at her, and then over.
Yeah, it's so.
I am so glad they didn't do this version.
Yes, me too.
Protosevich, for the flaws his scripts, I'm assuming all of his scripts had certain flaws in it, but the one we read especially, he at least understood I Am Legend.
Yeah, exactly.
He got the ideas of it and the philosophies of it, even if he didn't do a perfect job and undercut his own point.
Yeah.
He got it to some extent. This is just, wow, Goldsman, you're an idiot.
It completely undermines the idea of the novel in so many ways. It was unbelievable.
Now, I should mention, there are like 5 different writers credited on this.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming the main credit is going to Protosevich because they used his original draft as a base. And then revisions by John Logan, which the only thing from Logan that was in this was the brief little bit of deer hunting.
Yeah.
Which wasn't even hunting, they just see a deer. And also the script also introduces the lions you eventually see. And,
yeah.
Which was a decent enough idea. And then it also credits Protosevich for revisions because, I'm guessing because they're using his later version too. And then the Neil Jimenez guy gets credited, and I have no idea what ideas of his are here, and I'm guessing it's barely anything.
Yeah.
And so the current revisions are credited to Akiva Goldsman, and I'm assuming he wrote the vast majority of this.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Oscar-winning writer Akiva Goldsman.
Oh, God.
For A Beautiful Mind. He also worked with Will Smith on iRobot.
Okay,
Which isn't too bad.
No. And I can see why he would go with Will Smith for this one, then.
Yeah. So apparently, according to Protosevich, he found out later because he thought this was going to be the version they were filming, and then he got the shooting script and was surprised that it was so close to his.
Yeah.
Apparently, according to him, he found out that Warner Brothers turned this version down, so the studio was right. And I'd like to think in part it was Will Smith just took one look at the script and went, oh, hell no.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, because I think although he does take the occasional odd one, he
7
does...
pounds.
Yeah, exactly, but on the whole, he doesn't do something that's completely and utterly terrible, at least from his character point of view.
Yeah. Well, Men in Black 2...
Yeah, but that was a franchise thing.
Yeah, that was a franchise thing, But yes, he generally chooses his parts pretty well. They don't always work out, and I don't know why he thought there was trilogy material in After Earth. But
yeah, I don't get that either.
But yeah, he generally is he does pretty solid work, and he picks good ideas even if they don't always pan out.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing is that he's very much the ideas guy, and he's very savvy when it comes to ideas.
Yes, and so we got the movie that we got, which I think is pretty good, even better if you see it with the alternate ending.
Oh, yeah.
Which, by the way, they actually reshot that ending less than a month before it came out.
Wow.
Apparently that was how much they panicked at the test screenings, yes. And the story of I Am Legend doesn't end here. I'm not going to cover this in too terribly much detail because, there's possible future episode material here.
Yeah.
But I want to go over it just because it's relevant.
Yeah.
And before they reshot the ending, they actually brought in Mark Protosevich to write a treatment for I Am Legend 2 based on the original ending. And I think he said they actually got to a script for him.
Right.
And his version is that they leave the city and they look for months, but they don't find the survivor camp. And then they find a different survivor group holed up in Attica prison, and it's like really fascistic. And they enjoy torturing the infected for no real reason, but there's also like subhuman infected there.
Right.
And eventually he gets dumped back in Manhattan, and the alpha male they form sort of an alliance.
Right.
And it sounded like it could have been interesting. He said the idea is that he was setting it up for a third movie where they go deeply into the idea of the infected are the new humanity and Neville is the anachronism, which
Right.
I wish we could have seen that in some form. So yeah, that got canned when they reshot the ending. And then the movie made way more money than even Warner Brothers was expecting. And so they spent, I think they spent like 5-6 years scrambling trying to make an I Am Legend 2.
I can understand why they would want to, but it's just a story that you can't really continue.
Not the way they ended it in the theaters, no?
Oh well, definitely not the way in the theaters. But I just don't think a sequel would ever work.
But they basically shot themselves in the foot. And
Yeah.
so they tried 2 different versions of a prequel.
Oh God.
The first of which was supposed to be around the first outbreak during the Thanksgiving Day parade, I think they said.
Yeah.
And then they did another one, which I think this is the one that I have the script for, which was written by D.B. Weiss, who's one of the showrunners on Game of Thrones.
Huh.
And I think the idea here is that it's after New York has been cut off and after his family dies, and they go on like a road trip to Washington to try and maybe there's a potential thing there. And apparently there's an infected elephant that goes on a rampage, which sounds hilarious.
Yeah, that sounds ridiculous.
What Goldsman said is that, well, we have to do this whole thing where we show the world and then show it falling apart. And we already did that in the first movie, so they canned the prequel idea. And I think from what I understand in that script, I've only skimmed through it a bit, but it opens with him watching Shrek with his daughter, which why?
Oh God, the Shrek thing.
Apparently Emma Thompson would have had a role in it.
Well, that makes more sense because she was completely wasted in the film.
That would have been interesting. And so a few years later, after they canned that idea, they wrote a version which they were describing as a sequel, and it was supposed to have Will Smith in it. It was written by the guy who wrote Grace of Monaco, which I've heard is terrible. Apparently, according to Akiva Goldsman, after that fell apart, he said that the story was, it begins, and it has Will Smith in it, and you're wondering what the hell is going on, and it turns out he's a clone.
No.
How did they clone him after the apocalypse?
That's like the kind of shit they pulled in the Resident Evil series.
Yes, only not quite as dumb.
No, but it's close.
It would have made, honestly, it would have been tacky, but would have made more sense to just begin where the first movie ends in the survivors colony, and you just pan over, and there's Robert Neville's twin brother, Roy Neville, or something. So yeah, and now they're working on a reboot.
Oh.
And they're starting off with a unrelated spec script called A Garden at the End of the World, and rewriting that into an I Am Legend movie. Whether this gets off the ground, who has any clue? I have the script, but I haven't read it.
I hope it doesn't.
But my understanding is that the plot of that is it's a post-apocalyptic future where nothing grows, and this guy is obsessively planting trees trying to jumpstart the ecology or something, and then a woman shows up, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So yeah, no, I don't want to see it. I don't have any faith in that.
No, it sounds terrible.
I don't know if it sounds as bad as cloned Will Smith, but I so want to read that script.
Yeah.
I hope that script leaks so we can do that episode someday.
Yeah. Well, I should say, it doesn't sound as bad as cloned Will Smith, and it doesn't sound as awesome as infected elephant.
No, no. Like pale infected elephant. Because elephants go on rampages often enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was I Am Legend month, the capper. Final thoughts on this?
I'm much more appreciative of the movie.
Yes, me too. And it was better. It was a better episode than our massive Freddy vs. Jason.
Yes.
It was a good episode, but it was painful to make.
It was. But the biggest problem I found with doing this is that the scripts were so similar that it became difficult to keep going. That was my problem anyway.
For me, they had a different enough feel to them that wasn't a problem.
Yeah, I guess I just probably wasn't reading enough.
Which I guess I could also tie this into Freddy vs. Jason in saying that I saw an article labeled 7 first drafts better than the final. Mark Protosevich I Am Legend was on it, as well as the Eibel M. Berger meta wank Freddy vs. Jason.
Right.
Yeah, that guy's on drugs.
Definitely. Jesus.
And yeah, I quite enjoyed these scripts. They were all...
Yeah, I found them quite an interesting read, and reading people's interpretations of the novel, because I
Yes,
really liked the novel, and it was almost like Elseworlds Tales or something like that.
yes, indeed it was, and I'm just glad that the majority of them were at least baseline good.
Yeah, I mean, it was only the last one really that was terrible.
And
The
I
oth- the
I'm
others were very readable.
I am so sorry that I found that one.
But I think it was a good to cap off the ending, really.
Yeah, it was good to say, yeah, these other ones have their flaws, but look at this piece of crap.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, that was the I Am Legend episode. This was a little stressful, but pretty fun to make.
Yeah.
And, I've had a great year with Screenplay Archaeology. Um, as usual, check out the Facebook, Tumblr, and Twitter, and the RSS feed. Those links are all going to be below.
Hmm.
Check us out on SoundCloud, um, Internet Archive, and YouTube. Those links are there. Deusdaecon's channel is going to be linked as usual.
Oh yes, Deusdaecon reviews on YouTube.
Yes,
Got a plug.
yes. Check out SpaceMonkeyMafia.com,
Yep,
or is it .net? I forget.
it's .com.
.com. Okay, which is where we're hosted.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're moving up in the world. No, not yet. Not until we have TV Tropes pages of our own. But
Oh yeah, that's definitely when you know you've made it.
yes, definitely. And to cap it off, I'd like to thank everybody who's been listening, everybody who's been giving me clicks and plays because they're very much appreciated, and all the new subscribers I've gotten in the past couple months on YouTube. Whether or not you're subscribing for this, thanks to you anyways.
Yes, absolutely.
And go and subscribe to Deusdaecon's channel because it's great, and he's way more competent at videos than I am. So yeah, go check him out, and happy anniversary, guys. Have a nice time.
Yeah. Take care.